Are they assembled yet? Are we gonna have them as part of the unveiling of the new conference room, newly remodeled?
It looks nice if you haven't seen it.
I was in Chatham the other day.
30th, 2018. Please start with Pledge of Allegiance. Good evening. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Again, we're going to thank Bridgewater State for hosting us. I hear our regular meeting space is soon going to be ready for us again. So in the meantime, thanks to everybody for shuffling and meeting over here. First item on the agenda tonight will be public announcements and comments, and I ask that people come up to the front here and state their name. Yep, go ahead.
Hi everyone, and to the board. My name is Nate Mayo. I've just started with Vineyard Wind. There's been a lot of work and discussion in the public and the media on the project, and I am sort of making myself available. I'm going to be in the community. I'm from Provincetown, and really, committed to continuing that discussion as we have previous meetings with, taking back the host community agreement to readdress and reassess. And there's been a lot of valid concerns that we heard, a portion of which fall squarely on us in terms of our not being clear about what's going on. I think some of those can be addressed through conversation, and then there's another pool that I think, rightfully said by both the board and by the community, need to be fleshed out and understood and worked on, and we need to learn more, and we need to reapproach that. So I guess I'm just saying that my phone is available to you, email. I'm willing to meet with anyone, whether it be the board or citizens and residents. I'll pass on my contact information to the board, and to the public it's Nate Mayo, first initial, last name at Vineyard Wind, and you can reach out to me at any time. I'm happy to continue the conversation. It's an important one, and we appreciate the opportunity to be before you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Christine.
Hi, Christine Bailey from West Yarmouth. And I actually was here tonight to thank the board. I think that there has been an amazing amount of work that has been undertaken by Dan, by Chris, I know by Carl, by Jeff, and other people in your various departments when they really took a careful listen to citizen concerns and also to the issues of concern about Lewis Bay. And I wanted to commend them for the work that they did. I know some of them are pretty aggressively here yelling about, hey, take a look at this. But I also, in terms of this letter, really beautifully constructed letter, I think really productive. And I just want to thank you all publicly for sharing the kind of concern about the Bay and the fact that, this is not where it belongs. This is a lot of issues, and this is a true treasure in this community. Another bay like this does not exist in this community. And, as we said all along, we're not opposed to wind power. I'm kind of fascinated by some of the people. I've even seen people from Brewster saying, oh, we need this, but they're not offering to put it in the Brewster tidal flats where they're trying to develop fisheries and other kinds of things. So I think I just want to thank you for this and for your assistance with all of this. And thank you very much for all you've done. And thanks for putting up with being slapped around a little, yelled a little, and whatever, annoyed or whatever at various times. So we appreciate your help. Take care.
Is there anybody else who would like to address the board? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Kim Berner. So sorry in that I only saw 5 names on the website, so I put together 5 packets, and 2 people will have to share. I can try to do another one and send it to you. I just wanted to speak to it. I only did 1 picture and saving paper and ink. I'm talking to you about the new bike path, the extensions going from the Bass River to Great Western. It runs right along Route 6. So you'll see I put a little map in of my neighborhood. I live at 27 Erickson Way, so I'm right off of Great Western. I'm 3 blocks north of High Bank and just off of Great Western, so between Great Western and the Bass River. where the bike path is being put in is right along Route 6. There's been a huge amount of clearing out of trees and picking up the old rails, and right now there's no path yet, but there's just a big flat open space. They also took down the old bridge, they've changed the way the waterway is in the river, and they've made the embankment where the bridge hits differently. What's happened in my neighborhood is it's loud. You can hear Route 6 now. It used to be on a cold winter's night, you know, when it was really cold, all the leaves were gone, and you would hear it. Now you hear it all the time. You'll see I've included letters, and what I've done, I started with the town, I went to the DPW and Jeff Colby. He directed me to DOT, who's building it, Department of Conservation and Recreation, we'll maybe do some planting. It's made a big difference, it's really loud. I've been writing. Dan Driscoll at DCR, Department of Conservation and Recreation, has been kind of the only person receptive to, okay, now, my last phone call with him this week was that once DOT is done with what they have to do, and they've planted their 4 little sprigs of, I'm guessing lavender, and maybe 3 boxwoods, I don't know, I'm waiting for Dan to get the plans to see, and then Dan will tell me if he has room to plant things. I'm just bringing it to your knowledge. We are a small community there, you know, from Bass River up to Route 6, but it's unfortunate because you hear Route 6 now all the time, which is not something I want. And once the window's open, it's going to be annoying. I'm hoping that the trees will be able to help. I'm hoping that DCR will in fact be able to plant trees. The way the rocks are currently on the new bridge, it's all the way up to the top now, so I don't even know where we could plant anything. I just wanted you to be aware, in case I, at some point, myself and my neighbors come to you guys for a little bit of help, that it's not, you know, oh my God, I have no idea. Again, what they're telling me right now, DOT has said, we have built this, the town approved it, I want nothing to do with noise abatement, I will never have anything to do with noise abatement. That's what the letter says that you have in your packet, that's what they said to me on the phone. DCR Dan Driscoll is being very helpful, we'll see what we can do. I just wanted you to be aware, I hope we can, because you can now, a lot of trees came down, a lot of stuff came down. You can walk on the path, on what will be the path now and see Route 6, if you're familiar with that area. So, just trying to do something about it. Again, just wanted you guys to know.
Well, that's disappointing. I don't know if you know, there was another neighborhood group back behind the high school up of Fenway.
I've heard, yes.
And they were very successful, and what we heard from them was, you know, while they don't really do noise abatement, they were very acceptable to working with them and doing some plantings and stuff.
DOT has not been, I'm hoping that Dan at DCR will be.
Okay.
He has been that, he's told me about that particular thing. I also met with Tim Whalen, who also mentioned that problem, and I'm hoping that we will get something. Again, behind the high school, just the noise of the path as opposed to the noise of Route 6, I don't know that we're going to be able to do anything about the noise of Route 6, is what's hard. And also, I guess also what I want to say, I don't know if it'll ever come up for our town again, but to be aware that when you shift the environment, the noise is going to change. You know what I mean? It's just, because it's a long stretch there, it's probably about a mile long.
Okay, well, keep us posted.
Yep.
I appreciate your
Will
comments.
do, thanks.
And I'm not sure how much we can help when it's a state project. We did host a variety of public hearings and such before they actually started the construction, but you know, in terms of planning that far out, you probably wouldn't have known, you know, it's hard to...
Right, to know what it would have meant, or that it would have created a noise issue. I'm not sure I even would have thought of had I been aware of the hearings. So,
I understand. All right, well, Dan here is our town administrator. If there's anything, you know, if you can just update him. If there's anything we can do to help him. And unfortunately, we have very little leverage, but certainly I'd like to hear speaking for myself. But however we can help. Is there anybody else here who would like to address the board? Okay, seeing nobody, we're going to go to our 6:10
Seebeck Lease hearing. Hello. You're just in time. Take your coat off. Dan can give us some background.
Tour, I went to Simpkin School and,
Oh, no.
yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, just, I sent the memo earlier today relative to what this project is all about. It's asking for a motion that's attached to the packet that I sent to you for a 30-year lease authorization by the board. But as mentioned in my memo, the contract document with the developer, the solar developer, is for a 20-year term with a mutual agreed-upon extension of 5 years beyond that. And we dialogued back and forth with Liz on this. This is round 3 of a rooftop program that Seebeck has arranged for, and it'll provide some behind-the-meter relief for the town. And I'll let Liz pick it up from there. I think you're kind of ready to go.
Yeah, is there a mic I'm supposed to speak into?
No, we don't
Right here.
have to.
Yep.
Gotcha. Okay, so, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. We've had, 3, this will be the 3rd PB initiative. And, we've tried to have Yarmouth involved. And in fact, one of the, we have, in round 3, we have 2 Yarmouth fire stations. And we tried to have fire station number 3 in round 2. Keep track of that. And it was not, the vendors didn't bid on it, but things have changed now in the world of solar because the inverters are much more, there are more of them, they're more able to collect a good, efficient, economically rewarding amount of power from the sun, even when you're facing west and east. So it's evolved, and that's why the fire station out on Bucks Road is now a good candidate, and in fact, the vendors bid very vigorously on that. In addition, we added the fire station 1, and again, the same kind of thing as these pictures can show. They're looking at putting the, this is from Main Street, or, is it Main? Yeah, so they're looking at putting solar panels here. This is the depiction. But also here. So they're not just facing south, they're facing west. And as you can see here, they're facing east. So, and what the vendors do now is they run the calculations based on the orientation to the sun, the pitch, the solar modules, and so on. And they come up with a basic evaluation. Is it worth their while to build this? And then they make a bid. So we have the bids in, and we've already selected the vendor. The vendor bid was a very good power purchase agreement price, and we're going forward. And about maybe a month ago, I was meeting with Dan and I think Chris on something else, and I mentioned that we were going forward with our round 3, and they urged me to look again at some of your buildings, and so I did. And we agreed that the 2 fire stations would be good candidates, so we kind of pushed them into round 3, and they basically got in just in time. We put the RFP out, and they were included in the RFP, and we have a great response from a very good vendor. So we need a lease authorization, which is our lawyer, Seebeck's lawyer, basically wants that as a formality that it shows that the town has the authority to lease the space. So it's really kind of just a formality. But nonetheless, it's one. We will also be asking to make sure that there's no liens or conditions on those rooftops, which we would assume there aren't, but we will want that affirmed by the town. So the 2 fire stations, just to give you a little bit of an idea, Fire Station 1 is looking to have an installation at about 67 kilowatts, which is a very good installation. Fire Station 3 is looking at 136 kilowatt installation, which is great. So they're worth doing, definitely, and it's nice to be able to include Yarmouth. I think that's pretty much it, of course, except for questions you may have.
Thank you, Liz. Liz, I noticed in here you have a asset mill ladder in this one.
Yeah.
So you won't have to come back to us, you don't think?
No, that deserves a little bit of explanation. The costs for round 3, we've learned to have the towns pay a portion of their share of the upfront costs for development of the initiatives. That's why we can ask for less on the adder, because we don't need to get reimbursed for money that we've spent preparing for the RFP and the contract negotiations and so on. So it's really good.
In terms of the lease,
I'm not sure how old this building is, but if we were ever to, 20 years from now, I'm not sure if it's going to be an adequate fire station for us. What happens if the town looks to remodel, or what happens to, are we allowed to, if needed, amend the structure at all?
Well, if you were to, because we're facing this with DY, school district, of course, the vendor does need to be made whole. They're going into this deal with their banks for 20 years. Now, that doesn't mean you don't have a valuable asset that you can, arrange to have moved, perhaps. But yeah, you do need to be cautious about the fact that it is a 20-year contract with a vendor who's made a financial commitment to a bank, and he's going to need to have his income. And you're going to have to provide for that in some form.
No, and then it's not on, it's not even on the radar, but
Right.
I'm just
No,
trying
it's good to think about those things.
Okay, Eric, any questions?
The age and condition of that building, the 20-year commitment, does give me pause for a little bit of concern.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing, I think the reason we're here tonight is because not only was this in the consent agenda last time, which some people objected to, but it also wasn't specific enough as to which buildings it was covering.
Yeah.
This one doesn't seem to include any building, it's just an open, nothing is filled in.
On the authorization?
No, the motion that's in the packet that was
I don't see
emailed.
a motion, I'm just looking at page 1 of the contract.
Yeah, the contract's a generic document.
Okay.
It has to be executed with the specific information.
Okay, and where is the motion, Dan?
I don't have it all. No, I had one that legal counsel.
I've been through this a couple of times, I haven't seen it in the packet.
It was, came to me by legal counsel earlier today.
This is specific to.
This is specific to, this is from our legal counsel.
Okay. That answers the question.
And I could, because you're concerned, hearing your concern, we are in the process now of signing contracts. So, the concern about fire station number 1, if you don't think you want to go forward with that, this is going to be a big junction in which you decide that. You're going to get, this lease authorization being somewhat just a formality is immaterial really to the contracts. It just provides that you can go into the contracts. We will be sending you contracts within the next week and a half, and then, I may need to come back or whatever, but that will be, of course, much more of a pulling the trigger.
In reading the lease, Liz, my understanding is that there's this due diligence phase the developer will do on the rooftops to
Yeah.
answer these questions, and it doesn't, whatever their findings are will be shared with us, and it doesn't bind us to any expenditure of any money. It'll be along the lines of, if the rooftop isn't suitable, then at that time it'll be brought to our attention, and then it'll, then we'll have to make a decision as to what we want to do from that, if it's something that's at issue there, so.
Do they do that analysis prior to the execution of the lease, or they do?
Yeah, he actually let me know he's going to be wanting me to set that up so that he and I can revisit you for that very reason. Here's what we propose, etc.
Does Station 1 have any capital needs that are even a blip on the radar? I mean, Station 3 is a different animal, it's relatively new. Station 1 is relatively old.
Chief Simonian's been in on this from the beginning, and he is very much in favor of this, and he did not bring to my attention any issues related to the rooftop at number 1.
Okay.
He did, and it's also a fact that should you choose to sell the building for some reason, the solar is an asset, and it would be sold with the building and be a boon to any purchase, somebody who's going to purchase that.
Okay. Thank you.
You mentioned that if the town were to attempt to get out of the agreement with Station 1, because it is the older building, they would have to make the vendor whole. Do we have any idea how that would be determined?
Yeah, there's a chart that's a part of the contract that's called, I think it's developer termination. It's Exhibit D, but I know you don't have the contracts yet, so, but yes, there is a whole costing determination that goes in with the contract.
And that's based on what year you opt out.
Yeah,
Yeah, they essentially have calculated the number of days of sunlight per year on average. They ran this model to identify the annual kilowatt generation and how much that would generate. So you just kind of go from there, from if you're gonna bring the panel system down, they run the numbers to whatever time is left in that agreement. And it'll be, you have to come to terms with that, but that's what they would present you.
I wish I had a sense of how onerous that would be or not, you know, in a hypothetical example of saying after 10 years the town wanted to get rid of that building.
I think you should assume it's fairly onerous. I don't think you should go in if you think you're going to be rebuilding this building. My counsel to you is that it's not a place to be putting solar panels. It is a binding agreement and you'll pay a price.
I mean, it is a very old building, and with all due respect to our fire chief, I don't know whether or not he was even thinking along those lines of replacement of the building or consolidation of the fire department or some other thing like that. Other than that, you know, it's the only concern I would have.
Mark?
Can you just restate what the costs are to the town of Yarmouth?
Right now, I think we have 3 months worth of share costs, and they total, no, that's the one piece I didn't, yes, I did.
It's in the memo.
Yes, it is.
It's,
Share costs at this point
I think our share of about $5,200 or thereabouts.
yeah.
okay.
Share, yeah, cost due to Yarmouth to date, 5,412. Where is
Okay.
it in?
And the revenue generation, I'm just thinking for the people that are watching at home and want to know what's going on. How much money are we going to save?
You're gonna say the PPA price is about, let's call it 8 cents. Net metering, well, no, this is behind the meter. You're gonna offset your electric costs, which are about to go up. Thank you, Eversource. 22 cents perhaps, minus that 8 cents. That's your savings.
Got it. So if you were to project that out, what's that over the course of the year?
Well,
I believe Station 1 was about $8,000, based on our past conversation. Station 3 would have been, because it's much larger, about double that.
yeah, that sounds right.
So we're in the $24,000 range?
A year,
You know,
yeah.
okay. Thank you.
We're not gonna retire after that.
No, I understand, it can't be
It
stated
helps.
over enough
Absolutely.
how much we hope to save.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you multiply it by 20.
And there'll be other rate cases, by the way, over the next 20 years that
Yeah.
will tear into the kilowatt charge, so that's something to, you know, this is a gift that'll keep giving for a while, so.
Is there any way to make the motion subject to rechecking on the forecasted capital needs of that building, just so that we don't get ourselves into a bind?
I would note that there is nothing binding in this commitment. There is no commitment, I shouldn't even call it that. You're just verifying that you are the body that has the authority to commit to a lease. That's all this piece is.
If it comes back with some findings that are troublesome, I'll bring it back to the board with a strategy as to whether we should do it or not do it, or if we want to do it, how much that might cost to put it in position, so. But this is just authorization. If everything checked out, I'll double check with you again, but if everything checks out, we could go forward.
Well, I have the motions. They're the same, one for each station. And before I make the motion, I'd like to read them for discussion, because I don't think that's what they said. Here is how the motion reads, and I'm not making the motion. The Board of Selectmen in the town of Yarmouth authorize the installation of a rooftop solar system on top of the Yarmouth Fire Station #1 located at 96 Old Main Street, Sylvania. Further to effect said installation, the town will enter into a lease attached hereto for up to 30 years on the terms and conditions set forth therein, and which was made pursuant to a request for proposal issued by the Cape Virginia Electric Co-op, CBEC. And further, that the town administrator is hereby to authorize to hereby authorized to execute and enter into the lease and into what we would expect. So it's, I guess it's the first sentence, well, it's the 30-year term. I thought we were talking about 20, but I realized it
It's
says
up
up
to.
to, right. But it's the first
No
sentence
more
where it
debts to be
says,
issued.
the Board of Selectmen of the Town of Yarmouth authorize the installation.
It would only go through if condition to the building condition would be execute a signature on it to make it go forward. If it was such that it couldn't take the installation or the capital needs were such that it couldn't, we wouldn't sign off on it. So that's why we separated the motion to two. So each project is each individual entity to look at.
I just think this is premature.
What if we had language in there, Liz, that said that we authorize the installation subject to negotiating a satisfactory lease? Would that be okay?
Well, yeah, that's fine. Yes, it's absolutely to say authorized contingent upon approval of contracting. Absolutely. That's what we're looking for.
I think that would alleviate our concern.
Authorize installation subject to, say that again?
Contingent on approval of all contracts.
By the Board of Selectmen. I think that
I guess
satisfies both
what we're saying
sides
is,
of it.
we want to verify that it's structurally sound and.
No, we don't even have to get that specific. We're okay with it as long as the contract that's ultimately agreed upon is satisfactory to us. If it's not satisfactory to us, then all bets are off.
And if it's not structurally sound, all bets are off too. You still have that
Right.
opportunity.
I don't think you'd wanna, they'd wanna go forward.
No, but if
Once
you
it's
also
not
decide you don't want to make that commitment for 20 years, that's your decision and you don't have, that's fine, that's acceptable.
Yeah, I think as Eric said, I don't think the newer fire stations is a concern.
Right.
It's just the one on Old Main Street.
All right, so you want to try this? I will make a motion that the Board of Selectmen in the Town of Yarmouth authorize the installation of a rooftop solar system on top of the Yarmouth Fire Station #1 located at 96 Old Main Street. Should probably say South Yarmouth, Mass. Contingent upon approval of all contracts
By the Yarmouth Board of Selectmen.
by the Yarmouth Board of Selectmen. Further to effect said installation, the town will enter into the lease attached hereto for up to 30 years on the terms and conditions set forth therein, and which was made pursuant to a request for proposal issued by the Cape and Vineyard Electric Co-op, CEDA. And further, that the town administrator is hereby authorized to execute and enter into the lease and intergovernmental agreement with CEDA to acquire net energy and net metering credits or their equivalent value from said solar system.
I think that's convoluted that way.
To be honest,
Mother of all run-on sentences.
if you, for our purposes, and I don't mean to circumvent what Dan's trying to do, the first sentence that you read is what we're looking for.
Yeah.
A lease authorization, that's it.
And once we get that and we get something then we can authorize him to sign it.
I think he was, God bless him, he's trying to.
I know.
That's how council had recommended that be presented.
The lease is supposed to be in furtherance of the agreement. The agreement is subject to the approval by the board, so I think the lease portion of it is premature
Yes.
because it's contingent upon
I think
whether or not the board approves the agreement.
So let me rescind that motion. It hasn't been seconded. So the new motion will simply be the Board of Selectmen of the Town of Yarmouth authorize the installation of rooftop solar system on top of Yarmouth Fire Station #1 located at 96 Old Main Street, South Yarmouth, Mass. Contingent upon approval of all contracts by the Town of Yarmouth Board of Selectmen.
Period. Second.
Period.
I second it.
Okay.
Do the fast reading, not
That's
number
just-
two.
It's only half
We
as
don't have to
long now.
understand it, do the fast reading.
Is there any discussion on that? Dan
If I
is-
may, to the chair,
yes.
some late information. Deputy
Yes.
Chief Sawyer just sent us a message. He said that the main part of the roof is 9 years old to 10 years old. The smaller section off to the side is 2 years old.
So this is the main section, I guess?
Yeah,
So you're saying
it's 9 to 10 years old.
and it's just been re-roofed, I know that. So that's one reason we're considering it, is that the shingles are new.
Typically, the south side of that one is going to be subject to faster deterioration of acceptance. It's kind of at the border.
Is there any other discussion on that? And
No, that's all he had indicated.
We need the other,
The other one for Station 3.
yeah, well, we have to vote on this one first.
But it was
so,
doing it separately.
Yes,
I seconded it.
Yeah, okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried unanimously.
The fast reading is like my typing. It's fast, but there's a lot of mistakes.
No, I'm sorry, all right.
I'll do this one a little bit slower. The second motion is, I make the motion for the Board of Selectmen in the town of Yarmouth to authorize the installation of a rooftop solar system on top of Yarmouth Fire Station Number 3, located at 520 Buck Island Road, and that's in West Yarmouth, contingent upon approval of all contracts by the Yarmouth Board of Selectmen, period.
Second.
I just have one point that I think that we should, I know we took the CVAC part of it, but does it matter that CVAC is not mentioned in that?
no,
Okay.
no. I'm going by what my lawyer sent. And what he wanted to have moved, I'm just gonna read it so we're all confident that we're accomplishing what he sent me to do. To authorize the town manager or administrator to lease out for a nominal value the roof of Building A and Building B located for up to 30 years for the purpose of installing and owning solar voltaic energy systems pursuant to an RFP to be issued by the Cape and Ridge Electric Cooperative, subject to the town receiving the net metering credits or their equivalent value from said solar system. So we haven't gone as deep as he has, but you basically are giving, you're authorizing that
lease-
roof
the
for
lease-
photovoltaics, which is really what we're looking at.
And the lease will identify. Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously.
Excellent.
Thank you, Liz.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'll turn it over to Mr. Stone.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. First, public hearing is the special alcohol and entertainment license for the Irish Festival, 689 Route 28 West Yarmouth.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Come on.
You want me to read it?
No, you can, wherever, you can sit here, why don't you stay close
All
by?
right, sounds good.
We don't have anything in our hands. I take it you're Patrick?
Hey, yeah.
Patrick McDonough? Okay, Patrick, I'll read the legal notice and then we'll hear from you. How's that?
Perfect.
Okay. The Board of Selectmen, acting as the local licensing authority for the town of Yarmouth, has received application from Patrick McDonough Irish Music Events LLC for a special wine and malt and entertainment licenses for the Yarmouth Irish Festival to be held at the former drive-in site at 669 Route 28 West Yarmouth on March 10th and March 11th, 2018. Festival hours will be 10 o'clock a.m. to 8 p.m. on March 10th and 11 o'clock a.m. to 7 p.m. on March 11th. Entertainment will include public show and live music with 8 bands and amplifications over the 2 days. Hearing will be held on Tuesday, January 30, 2018 in room 205 at Bridgewater State University, 1175 Route 28, South Yarmouth. The Selectmen's meeting begins at 6 p.m. Written comments will be accepted in the Selectmen's office until 4:30 on Friday, January 26, 2018. Verbal comments will be accepted at the hearing. So why don't you tell us about your activity that you would like to conduct on the premises at those dates and what it's going to consist of?
Sure. So, I've been running Irish events for probably the last 20 years or so. Festivals probably for the last 5 years. I do an event in Canton at the Irish Cultural Center, and then I do an event in Marshfield at the Marshfield Fairgrounds. And I've always been a good friend of the St. Patrick's Day Parade down here, and obviously it's become more successful every year and year. So in the spirit of trying to keep it fresh, I was approached by Johnny Fallon and talked about running an Irish festival. And we searched locations and went around and looked at different areas and thought that the old Yarmouth Drive-In would be a perfect location in conjunction with the parade. And we've received a lot of good feedback from people that, in addition to coming to the parade, would come in and stay overnight. And we worked with the tourism board to submit an application for a grant and see if they could help us launch the actual festival. In addition to music, we'll have vendors selling everything from jewelry to shirts and hats. We also have Tierra, that's a group that's will trace your Irish roots. So it's kind of it's built to be a family event with a cultural flair as well, and hoping to attract people that have kind of come to the Cape for the weekend. As opposed to the parade, which is a 1 day, but have them stay both Saturday and Sunday. And it's our first year, so we're not expecting the Milwaukee Irish Festival with 20,000 people, but we're going to learn a lot from this year and hopefully build it as an annual tradition as it goes forward.
Okay, and there'll be an admission, it's pretty modest, right? $5.
$5, yeah.
Is that $5 per day, or is that $5 for both days? How does that work?
So it's $5 per day, but we've...
I know you've given out a lot of free tickets, and you're giving them out to motels and things like that to encourage people to...
Exactly, yeah. So we've gone to the hotels to encourage them to provide tickets for patrons that stay at the hotel. We're doing a lot on social media, like we did a giveaway of, we said $250, but we gave, last Friday, we put it out there at 8 a.m., and by 11 o'clock, all 500 tickets were gone. We limited it to like 4 tickets per person. Now, again, they're free, not, if we get 30%, 40% of those people to show up, it would be a great thing. We also, part of the enticement, we're having Marquise Flowers from the New England Patriots is going to do an appearance on Saturday from 11 to, probably, we think 11 to 3, 11 to 4. Hoping that they win the Super Bowl on Sunday, and he brings the Super Bowl trophy down, and that will kind of add to the excitement as well. So there's a lot of expenditures involved. So hopefully, the $5 kind of helps offset that from everything from trash pickup to porta potties, making sure that we have a safe environment. I will tell you that we take safety very seriously. All of our bartenders that will be there are tip certified and provided the insurance, as well as we're also getting additional insurance on our side, which will certify the Town of Yarmouth, myself, and all the organizers that are running the event.
I see you have 7 different tip cards in here. Are these the people that are going to be at the event? These 7?
Yes, yeah.
Will there be any additional people serving alcohol?
No, just those people specifically.
Just that group?
Yeah, and then we also have an additional security company that I work with at the Marshfield Fairgrounds that will check IDs and bracelet any patrons that want to drink alcohol during the day. And the bartenders, in addition to our security that will be walking the facility, will have the authority to check IDs, as well as the bartenders check IDs as well.
Okay, now you mentioned checking IDs, which obviously is very, very important, it's critically important, in fact. What if anything do you do at your other events to ensure that intoxicated people are not being served alcohol?
Well, that's part of the duties of our security force, and also we have obviously the police details as well. But that's kind of their whole MO is to make sure that we have a safe environment at all times. They will monitor all the crowds that are there, and then the bartenders, obviously, it's their authority as well to serve or not serve, and so we rely on them because of their certification to make sure they're making the proper judgment.
And if there's any doubt, they shouldn't serve them.
Absolutely, yeah.
Who is this security company, Patrick? Tell me a little bit about that. Where are they from, and how many people will be involved, and what actually will they be doing?
So they're from
Other
Marshfield.
than checking IDs.
Yeah, so they're from Marshfield. I mean, they'll be actually checking people in through the gate. We'll have two entrances. The lobster boat, which is adjacent to the drive-in, has given us authority to use their parking lot. So there's an entrance that goes in from the lobster boat to the side. So they'll be basically handling the tickets on the way in, or the $5 admission charge. And then they'll also be monitoring the grounds, to your point, making sure that, there's safety at all times. We also allotted an area, because we work with the fire chief for first aid, that there'll be an ambulance parked there at all times in case someone, there's always, listen, I've been doing this for a while, there's always, I shouldn't say always, but there's always the chance of someone like that trips or slips or, gets a cut and they need a Band-Aid,
Especially if they're Irish, they might slip and trip.
Could happen.
I could say that because both my brothers are. Okay, so Dan, and I only want to do this now so I don't forget about it. Dan was telling me before we started this that he had talked to the police chief. And he had a little bit of a concern, I guess, about the front service area for alcohol, being that it's too close to Route 28. Do I get that right, Dan?
Yes, the chief's concern was with the parade, on the day of the parade, with the type of wheeling around traffic that goes on, what the plan for security was. He was just generally looking to get more guidance on that, and was not, as presented to him, comfortable with signing off on that.
Gotcha. So I think one of the concerns was the, having a beer truck was up the front of the road. So what we've done is,
Price is this one, right?
yeah, so I have an amended version. I have one copy that I just made quick on the way out, that we can take. And it will show that, both of our, beer trucks will be at the back tent furthest away from the road. So there's a beer truck here and a beer truck there, and there's no beer truck.
Nothing there.
on the
So it's
top.
been amended.
So can you show me where the truck's gonna be now?
Yes, so there's no, so this is the front tent here,
So right here,
yeah, and then there's beer truck one, beer truck two, so this is the back tent,
so nothing here.
nothing there, no.
Right, so the front one's been removed.
Correct. Per the direction of the talking issue.
All right, so you've already been aware of that. Okay. Why don't I go to the public first and then to the boards? Anybody in the public want to be heard on this? Did you return all the
Yes.
green cards?
Yeah.
I know there's a ton of them,
Oh, yeah. My hand hurts, I'm right.
and no one's appeared, so that's good, I guess, for you. Unless you gave them all free tickets, yeah. Okay, we'll go to the board. Eric, do you have any questions?
The combination of the words outdoor and music festival and alcohol do not necessarily conjure up happy visions. I think of like Woodstock or Burning Man or something like that. I mean, what are you expecting for attendance? I mean, do you see any potential for this to have a really good turnout and be a very party-like atmosphere?
I mean, I wouldn't be lying to you, like, we definitely hope that it's a fun atmosphere, because we obviously want people to have a good time. Our vision, like, just by pure experience over the years, is our goal is in the 2,000 range, 2,500 range, which would be a healthy crowd. Obviously, the challenge is that it's not, the summer, we're hoping, the third partner, or the almighty partner in this is the weather. If we end up with, please give us a 50-degree day or anything north of 32, and our attendance would pop a little bit. But, last year, people might recall that the parade was like 10 below, the wind chill it was freezing. We will have heaters in the tents, but it's still, the weather is kind of everything, and, our goal for year one is in the 2,500 range, but we're going to learn a lot this year. We're hoping that it's a good event and it continues for many years to come.
I trust your judgment. You've been doing this for 20 years. micromanage the details. You know, one thing I will tell you that this board is always concerned about with outdoor events is alcohol leaving the premises.
Right.
I think you said you have a wristband system?
Yes.
For people who have been checked. So, you know, where, I see you have a fence proposed for your parking areas in very close proximity to the area where the drinking will be going on, and, you know, I'm assuming it's gonna be a simple plastic snow fence or something like that. So, you know, just be aware that, you know, we do take the people getting into their vehicles with a beverage, and what could happen afterwards very seriously, so.
Absolutely, and obviously, I take that, you know, very seriously myself. That's why we make sure that we invest in, like, we'll have, I don't know if I answered your question, we will have 10 security people on staff that day, in addition to the detail.
Good.
As well.
But thank you.
Norm?
I'm not sure that I have specific questions. I, you know, certainly, you know, willing to give a try on this site. Have you inspected the site itself?
Yes, we
Yeah,
went out there
okay.
when it was 30 below, and so it was a little cold, we popped out in the car, but yeah, we definitely, like, you know, meeting with all the town administrators and things too, we know what the concerns are. We definitely try to keep it up front, and there's been some inspections there as far as making sure, but our plan is also to really kind of stay dialed into it as well, just to make sure, Johnny talked about getting a landscaping crew to come in and sweep it and clean it, like, so where the cars are being parked, to make sure that there's no debris and people are in a flat tire or anything like that.
Right. Yeah. Well, they're not actually be driving in that back area, though, right? They're gonna be parking in the parking lot at the Lobster Boat?
But the backup is also in the back area as well.
Oh, I see. Okay. So how are they gonna get to that area?
So there'll be a divided path down the side. One on the left side would be, if you're coming in from the road, would be a walkway, and then on the right side would be a driving entrance.
Okay, so they could drive in. And where is your security gonna be?
So they'd be at the top of the road, basically all throughout the whole road, down toward the tent. And then there's an entrance coming in from the lobster boat, they'll be there, and then there'll be people that'll be walking around as well.
Okay, I guess I would be concerned about another security point. So that it's obvious that people shouldn't be going to the parking area with drinks.
Absolutely.
You know, the area here, but then, you know, certainly the parking area out front, you know, where the lobster boat is secured with the locations that you've got. But, I would be concerned about that back parking area, and the possibility of people getting in, you know, to cars and leaving with drinks and so forth.
So I would take it upon ourselves, we'll make signs that basically say, like, no drinks to leave the facility, no drinks in the parking lot, and I will point out to our security guys that that's a number one priority, that no one's to leave the area with any type of beverage, whether it be plastic cups or not.
Okay, I think that sounds good. The other, now the stage is pointed east, I guess, would be my best guess. You know, I guess kind of wait and see what the reaction is of neighborhoods that are along that area. That is a concern that I have, is certainly the neighborhoods that are down along Parker River.
So we could definitely flip that. We could put it in the middle, we could flip it to the left. I will tell you that it's not like a YouTube concert. The amplification won't be, you know, like Great Woods or anything like that. You know, this is pretty like, it's traditional music, and, you know, people sing along, I guess.
My general feeling is that the direction of music should not be toward the neighborhoods along Parker River.
Okay.
That the more they could be out toward Captain Parker's in that area, it would be my general thought. I mean, certainly I know what from the rest of the board is appropriate. But I wouldn't think we'd want to, I think it's asking for trouble for the future.
And I'm totally on board with that. We can definitely move the stage to the middle. It was just kind of like there because, like the recommendation. Totally. Okay.
I think it's great. I think that, we've been looking for short-term uses for this parcel. I think it goes great with the parade. Safety and security is always our number one thing, nothing that hasn't already been said. I've heard a lot of the parade answers about making sure nobody leaves with alcohol, nobody's overserved. I would like to make sure that we have liability insurance. I saw a certificate of insurance there for liquor. I just want to make sure that the town has a liability insurance as well. And, to Norm's point about the stage and the music projection, keeping that as close to Route 28 where, when did you mail those cards?
They were delivered 23 January.
Okay, so there was ample time for them to appear. I just wanted to make sure they weren't. No, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that they weren't.
What does one of your slips say? What date? 21st, somewhere around there?
That's a toss-up.
January 19th.
19th.
Okay, perfect. So there's ample time for them to come, and I'm happy that they're not here, so hopefully they're supportive of the event. However, we find that these things usually flourish over the years, so in the case that we want that to happen, we want to make sure we keep them happy. So anything you can do, it's almost as if the stage should be up in the parking and the parking in the rear, but that's just me.
Well, can I speak to that just for 1 second? Because I think what you can't see in this picture is that there's a neighborhood very close
In
to
the
the
back,
back of it.
yeah.
So I actually think that,
I think the stage should be up here and the parking should be back here.
well, I mean,
I'm not gonna
I think given to Norm's point of the direction that the music is being projected in, I think that's probably the better of the two if the choices are east and west. I didn't know putting it in the parking lot was an
I
option.
don't know if it is an option. I'm just trying to keep it away from the neighbors and keep the neighbors as happy as possible.
Direction is really.
We'll definitely, we'll place the stage so it's not going to the neighbors, so it's heading the
Yeah.
opposite way.
Yeah, and even if you do, I know like with the bandstands, they're really good about making sure it's, it's contained in a certain direction, so.
Yeah, and the tent will have, obviously we'll have walls on it as well, so that will kind of maintain some stuff.
I think it's great. I've been in a lot of the places after the parade, and they're packed. There's certainly room for expansion. I think if people had more room, they would probably attend. So I think it's great. I think, to Norm's point, we're willing to try it and see what happens. I appreciate your level of investment and interest in our community, and hopefully we can have good partnerships.
Absolutely, and to your point, like Jerry Lanning from the Captain Parker's, he's so supportive because that's exactly what he said. He's like, I can't fit another
Oh, you
person.
can't move.
Yeah, it's like,
We're all friends.
Yeah, so he's like very supportive of our event, and he's got a service child in there as well. So
Imagine that.
Before I go to Mark, I should have done this earlier, but there is one letter that was written from Peter Smith, Chairman of the Yarmouth Community and Economic Development Committee, dated January 30th, in support of this festival. And he says that the CEDC, they met with the event organizers, Patrick McDonough and John Fallon, and believe they have the capacity to run a safe and successful event that will benefit the community and local businesses. Further demonstrating our support for this event is the recent award of $17,000 in tourism revenue preservation funds through the town's special event program. These funds will be used to offset marketing and program costs associated with the event. Thank you for your consideration. So, Mark.
I too want to associate myself with the comments of Norm and Eric. as you're probably aware that the town is wrestling with what to do long-term in terms of this particular site.
Yes,
Yeah, I think what intrigues me about this is it gives us a chance to see if this kind of use actually works. And so I think the fact that you're somewhat flexible in terms of making some adjustments, in terms of how best to manage this, I think there's a lot, I don't say there's a lot riding on it, but I think the success of this has some long-term spillover effects. There are many people in the community who believe that we have a growing arts community. We are doing more and more to support the arts. The idea of doing something like this has been mentioned before in terms of this site. I know it's come up a little bit in the Drive-In Site Utilization Committee. So I think this gives us a chance to see if it can work. So I applaud your interest in doing this here and seeing if there's a way to make this work, because if it works out for you, I think for the town as it plans and makes decisions about the future of the site, I think it can mean a lot.
Mark, I already been approached, like,
No
people-
pressure, though.
I know, when people are talking about the idea, they're saying, you're already giving me other ideas to run other events, so let's get through the first one first.
Yeah,
You know,
that's
so-
why I think it's great that you're flexible. I think Norm's point, and Tracy echoed this as well, is in terms of managing the sound. How do you manage the movement of the sound so that it provides the least disturbance to neighbors? And then it's also, I don't go back to the Cape Cod Coliseum days, but even when we had an indoor structure, we had usually traffic wandering around the neighborhood, which always became a point of discussion at selectmen's meetings. So the fact that you're sensitive to that and have sufficient personnel to help address it, I think is great. The only other question I would ask, and this is maybe to you, Mike, is whether or not we need to get, I'm not sure there's been yet a sign-off by the police chief as he's comfortable with how the adjustments are, and I'm not sure whether or not we should try to get that or get this approved subject to that or whatever. But
I would say, based on my conversation with him as recently as yesterday, that this modified plan, he did not have a chance to see and satisfy his uses.
okay. So there you go. So thanks for doing this.
Okay.
I stand with Tracy on this. I think it's a great idea. We've had a lot of events historically at that site, including fairs, carnivals, things of that nature. At one time, obviously, it was a drive-in. So I think to have interim uses and to see how they go on that facility is very important. We are looking at a possible development of a river walk down there, but there's going to be some economic challenges, I think, with that. So one of the options that may come out of a long involved study may be what we can use this facility for in terms of events going forward. And I've always said and believed, and I believe now, that events bring business. And there's just a lot of spin-off, a lot of people are going to benefit. It's ironic you mentioned Jerry Manning. I talked to him as recently as today, asked him what he thought about it. And he said that he's maxed out on that Saturday. He said, well, friggin', I can't handle the business I get set. But he said, I do think it will bring in additional business on Sunday. So even to those businesses that do very well, independent of this activity, I think it will help them on the second day. And I think it's a great idea.
And the timing, I think, is great. I think the fact
Yes.
that you're ending at 8 o'clock makes it much more comforting.
Yeah, and obviously the parade has the free shuttle service too as well, so that's part of kind of the aura of running it in conjunction with the parade. Again, all for like less driving the better, you know, with the business.
Not that they're gonna be overserved, so we don't have to worry about that.
We don't have to worry about that, but just in case they have one and they were free.
All right, so is anyone prepared to make a motion?
I make a motion, we close the public hearing.
Okay, we have a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Public hearing is closed. Do I have a motion to approve the application?
I make a motion, we approve the application with the amended map that was presented to the satisfaction of the police chief today.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, you fine with that amended map
Absolutely,
showing the
100%.
removal of the service area near Route 28?
Absolutely, 100%, yeah.
So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So So good luck,
Thank
looking
you so
forward
much.
to seeing your event.
Thanks for coming.
Okay. Next item. Let's see what show that this one. Yep, Grand Cafe. 80 Route 28 West Yarmouth. Who's on that one? You want to come forward? How you guys doing? Take a seat. Yeah, you didn't have as many cards. You only had 2 on your mailing list. You fellas want to introduce yourselves for the record, please?
Yeah, my name is Carlos Calle. He's with Carlos. It's gonna be his name license. I'm working with him on helping him out. We open in 628.
Okay, I'm going to read the notice into the record, and then you can tell us about your business and what you want, okay? The Board of Selectmen, acting as the local licensing authority for the town of Yarmouth, has received an application for a new annual wine and malt restaurant license from Lewis. How do you pronounce it? Paquet?
Parkway.
Paquet, okay. DBA Grand Cafe, Lewis Paquet, manager. The premise is a single-story, 2,500 square foot restaurant building with 2 entrances and exits located at 80 Route 28 in West Yarmouth. Hearing will be held on Tuesday, January 30, 2018, in room 205 at Bridgewater State University, 1175 Route 28, South Yarmouth. The Board of Selectmen meeting begins at 6 p.m. Written comments will be accepted until 4:30 Friday, January 26, 2018, in the Selectmen's office at Town Hall. Verbal comments will be accepted at the hearing. Okay, so why don't you tell us a little bit about your business, what you plan to do there, and what you're seeking for the license.
Okay, we opened the place in July 9, and we opened for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And before they have beer there, and customers asking for a beer, and we thinking sell some beer and wine, and we can go from there. So.
Okay, do either one of you have experience in businesses that sold beer and wine before?
No, we work for somebody else, but
Okay, but you were in the restaurant business?
yeah, this is our first.
All right. Have either of you talked to Officer Phil Magnuson at the Yarmouth Police Station?
We called, we made an appointment with him, but he never showed up, and we called back, and someone told us he's on vacation.
Yeah, he is. I think he is on vacation. You got to follow up on that. You really should talk to him because he's a really good guy. He knows all the liquor laws and all the responsibilities. The concern I have, and we have, of new businesses is if people don't understand what they're supposed to do, then they can violate the laws. And if they violate the laws and they come before the board, they could have their licenses suspended or canceled altogether. So it's really important that if the board grants the license, that you sit down with him, he's there to help, and he'll explain to you what's expected, what you can do, what you can't do.
Okay.
Okay? Anyone in the public want to be heard in this matter? Okay, go to the board. You have any questions, Mark?
Nope.
Tracy?
No, I see you've, I see that you have managed other restaurants that
Yeah,
had,
yeah.
that has had liquor service. And you have your tip certification and your insurance certificate is here. I guess the only concern that I have is, so you're the manager?
I'm gonna be the kitchen manager.
You're gonna be the kitchen
Yeah, I'm
manager?
gonna be working here.
So, we recently had a new business that started that also had a language barrier, that didn't understand the rules and regulations. I see he took his tips training, so I'm
sure he understands it. I just want to be sure that you're able to convey to your employees the rules, understand the rules, because you're not always going to be there. So how are we going to manage?
Yeah, we have somebody else who's chief certified, somebody working over that.
Is that Lawrence O'Brien? Is that this gentleman,
Yes. Yes.
Lawrence O'Brien? Because along Tracy's point, you can't have anybody serving alcohol that isn't tip trained. It's not enough to have just a manager. Okay, point, thanks. Okay, the next licensing matter is S&H Hotel LLC doing business as the Cape Point. Good evening.
My name is Gregory Demarcus. I'm an attorney with offices in Lynn. To my immediate right is the manager, Naresh Patel, and to his right is the assistant manager, Atul Verma.
Okay, good evening. I'll read the legal notice into the record and then you can proceed.
Okay.
The Board of Selectmen, acting as a local licensing authority for the town of Yarmouth, has received an application for a new annual all-alcoholic and holder license from S&H Hotel Yarmouth LLC, doing business as the Cape Point, Neelish Patel, manager. An application to pledge the license and inventory to the Cape Cod Cooperative Bank has also been received. The premise is a 116-unit year-round hotel, which includes a cafe, kitchen, bar, indoor and outdoor pools, seasonal cabana at the outdoor pool, meeting rooms, storage rooms, office, exercise facility, game room, parentheses, arcade, close parentheses, and laundry room, located at 476 Route 28 in West Yarmouth. Hearing will be held on Tuesday, January 30th, 2018, in room 205 at Bridgewater State University, 1175 Route 28, South Yarmouth. The Board of Selectmen meeting begins at 6 p.m. Written comments will be accepted until 4:30 Friday, January 26, 2018, in the Selectmen's office at Town Hall. Verbal comments will be accepted at the hearing. Okay.
A couple of house cleaning matters.
Sure.
Here's the green cards.
Okay, thank you.
And we want to substitute, we had filed something called liquor license transfer application material, additional material.
Right.
In that particular document, it had said that the lounge and the restaurant would have 40 seats occupancy, 49. It's been reduced to 40.
Okay.
So we'd like to just put that in there to reflect that that's the correct occupancy. Nothing
And
else.
that's the only change?
That's the only change in that document.
Okay.
Now, on November 6th, S&H Yarmouth Hotel LLC purchased the Cape Point Hotel. That hotel's been there for many years, I think since sometime in the 1980s. So, oh, am I wrong? No, 86?
It was the last one built before the hotel ban, I remember that.
So it's been there a long time. These gentlemen, for whatever reason, it should have been a transfer of license, but there's a safety certification required by the town, and the seller didn't want to do that at the time, and time was of the essence, so we've applied for a new license. The same hotel that had that same license, same premises, except the one thing that's different is the lounge and restaurant has been relocated from the second floor to the first floor, and it's 40 occupancy. They have renovated the premises. It's going to be obviously under new management. Mr. Patel, to my right, is a very impressive individual. He got a BS in computer science in 1998, I believe. He got an MBA in 2006. He's owned 2 convenience stores, one with liquor license in Virginia. He owns a Subway in Virginia. He owns a 7-Eleven in Boston. He's been involved with 2 hotels in 2006 and 2008. To his right, Atul Verma has a degree in hospitality. Very, very impressive guys. They're going to eventually franchise this. It's going to be a Best Western premier. deviate the Cape one. It's gonna keep the same DBA, but it's gonna be a franchisee of Best Western. One of the things we're asking for tonight, in addition to the allowance of a license and the appointment of Nilesh Patel as a manager, is a pledge. When they purchased the property, they got a substantial loan from Cape Cod Cooperative Bank, over $4 million. And a condition of that loan was that we would apply for a pledge of a license in the inventory, so we're asking for that as well tonight. They're gonna have about 15 employees. It's gonna be a very similar operation, but we think a better operation and a better hotel than was there before. You know, we'll answer any questions you might have, but we think it's gonna continue to be an asset to the community.
Okay, thank you. Let's quickly just go to the public to see if anybody wants to be heard on this. Seeing none, we'll have to go for questions to the board, and this time I'll start with Norm.
Oh, thank you.
Only so I don't forget.
All right, well, the first question always seems to be, should be about tip certification. Is that here in the packet?
Yeah,
They got tip certified,
they went to the class, I think, in
They went to the
December,
class
and
in
they're waiting
December.
for the,
Okay.
and I've actually met with Officer Magnuson
I
too.
saw that.
But they did get tip certified, and we'll email it to the board tomorrow. I don't have it with me.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there was somebody else though who had taken the course in December.
They both have
And
been
was
December
waiting for
26th,
the
and they're
card.
waiting for the card. They got it, they have it on their live
I have
phone.
no issues.
Oh, you have no issues?
Okay.
And,
I'm with next week.
oh, so you got yours, and you're going.
I got it, mine.
Oh, okay. And-
I just got it,
And not to be overly didactic about this, but as you probably heard us say in the prior hearing, anyone that serves alcohol, our rule in this town is they have to be tip certified, not just owners, but anybody that's handling alcoholic beverages. So
Yeah.
I'm sure Phil told you that, Phil Magnuson. Okay.
Do I get to continue, or
You do. In fact, you could have my time.
I see. Could you just talk a little bit, since the restaurant is moving downstairs, you said, right? And it's a dining room / bar, and is there a pool area right there? Can you talk a little bit about the flow and how that's gonna work and what the exits are so that we're clear on?
So yes, so restaurant is gonna be staying same place, and next to the restaurant is gonna be a bar.
Okay.
And then the exit, so we have a front exit, when you walk in and park your car, you have a front exit. And then you have an exit in the back, so if you're staying at the hotel, and if you wanna go to Dunkin' Donuts, we have an exit right behind in the back. And the pool, we have a bigger pool right now, but we are working with architecture and the town of Yarmouth right now to cut it down in a half, so we're gonna make the pool smaller.
Okay. All right, fine. Okay. I'm not sure I have any other specific questions.
Well, if you think of any, I'll come back to you unless I forget. Tracy?
I think your application is complete. I don't have any questions about that. I guess just with an in-holder's license, the free flow of alcohol throughout the property is allowed. So you're responsible to make sure it doesn't get into the hands of minors and then it doesn't leave the property. That's all part of the responsibility.
Sure.
Making sure that we have I know it says issued evidence of insurance, but I just want to make sure that we have all your insurance certificates. And is your outside pool open to the public?
No,
It's just for
that's
guests?
what it is.
I do have a question on the living and liability insurance. The only section that is indicated here is workers' comp. And there's not an indication of general liability.
There was a certificate of liability insurance in here, Norm.
Well, it does say certificate of liability insurance, but in the details,
That one only covers workers' compensation, the policy itself,
right.
that were listed as.
Oh, I see what you're saying, yeah, workers' comp and employers' liability.
Well, we'll email it to you tomorrow, you'll listen to me.
Okay, so that you
Yeah,
have
we
it.
wouldn't have been
Is it
able
a
to
local
buy it.
insurer? Who's your insurance agent?
Insurance agent out of, in the Massachusetts locally also. Not in Yarmouth, we have a
Needham.
corporate office in the
Corporate.
Lexington.
Roblin and Needham.
So you can have them fax it down to the town, or email it.
They wouldn't have been able to purchase the business, I mean, the building without building comprehensive insurance, the bank wouldn't have.
No, I'm sure that.
So all of your certificates, just email it to me, so I can email it to the board.
Go ahead.
This crowd control managing program, who completed that? You did?
Yes.
Okay, so that's you, all right. Good. Mark,
I have no questions.
do you want to just talk to the board very briefly about why you want the license pledge and what the legal implications of that are?
Yeah, a pledge of the license is allowed under chapter 138, section 25. And most lenders, it's like when you borrow money from a bank on your house, they want a mortgage on the house. They want security in all of the assets. So they've got a mortgage in the real estate, they got a security interest in all of the assets of the building, of the business, including the inventory and all of that. Now, they want security on the liquor license, and there's only one way you can do it. You need to do two things. You need to get a pledge approved by the local board, and you have to record it in the UCC filing statement with the Secretary of State in Boston. If you do those two things, it's a perfected pledge. Now, what that means is, as far as if they default on their note, and obviously we don't think that's going to happen, but if it does. The bank has the right to step into their shoes and find a buyer, and then they have to come in front of the board. The board does not abrogate any of their responsibilities. Unfortunately, in commerce today, it's just a requirement of every bank, Rockland and the other
But
banks.
that simply prevents the applicants or the owners from taking off with the liquor license.
Right, right,
And leaving the business without anything that's marketable,
right.
which the bank has an interest in.
And the bank did loan a tremendous amount of money.
I'd want to pledge a license if I put a 4 mil. I want more than that.
Well, they got more than that. They got guarantees. I think they have something, one of the documents that if they default, they give them the last cigarette and blindfold them and let them out. I think they got everything.
Okay, does that have a
Make a
motion?
motion to close the public hearing.
Have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed?
Make a motion to approve the application as presented.
Do I have a second on that?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, unanimously passed. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And,
Tomorrow we'll have the insurance
Good luck.
certificate.
I'm glad to see you took the opportunity to meet with Bill Magnuson. That was good. He was a nice
Thank you for
guy.
investing in Yarmouth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to point out, we have an even smaller and darker mushroom over here.
That's because you took his time.
Yeah.
They let this keep going forever.
You guys are such wallflowers.
All right,
I know, that's right.
Tracy won't forget you. She's
You were really between the lines, Tracy.
I don't know, I'm sure people would not agree with that. Okay, so, the next item on the agenda is, the warrant article discussion. There was one originally in the packet, there's a new one in your packet that's, listed as draft. And we'll let,
that's the new one.
this is the new one, yeah, the other one should put a line through it. We'll let, Dan explain to you, what's changed.
The change that caused the draft to be issued late, very late, was number 10 was an add-on to that We are in a contract cycle, as you know, with the bargaining units, and we needed a placeholder to put some money aside for settlements. And this has been a past practice with the town in years previous.
So this is difficult because we haven't looked into the substance of any of these articles to know. Right here.
Yeah, I can,
This is just basically generalized, saying that these are, they're all basically just placeholders. Did
Right.
we,
I will run down and
Okay.
give you a brief synopsis
That'd be
through
great.
this. So up to number 9 is what you typically see every year, the annual appropriations related to the town enterprise funds and school budgets. And of course, all those groups are coming in front of you at a later date.
what happens if there's a school override?
We will address that, much like we did last year, and have to take a vote at some point as to what we're gonna do about that.
But it will all be inclusive of Article 6?
That'll all be part of the article.
Subject to.
Subject to, right, that's correct. Free cash, 11. We have some ideas to present to you at a later date. Capital Stabilization Fund, we're gonna continue to put some money aside there. Additionally, also Stabilization Fund, number 13. Tourism Preservation Fund, standard, number 14. 15 is the DPW facility. We're looking for some guidance from the board on this one. If I may ask Jeff Colby, who's here in attendance, to briefly address where we're at with that. If I could, Jeff?
Certainly. On that particular article, we're wrapping up the feasibility study, which we briefed the board with about a month or so ago. And that's a amount of money for the total project, all in is about $14.9 million. So that's the magnitude of what we're talking about. So there's really two different options here, or potentially three, but at least two that I want to outline for the board would be to move forward with that particular project, that is to complete the design and construction. There's also another option, which is to pursue just the design at this time and come back and potentially the next town meeting for the construction portion of that. I talked with the consultant about what that might look like if we were to take it in a two-step approach versus the one-step. And the design, which would get us through the bid specifications and actually able to go out for bid for that, plus an owner's project manager, which is required for this type of project. Anything over $1.5 million on a public project or a building project, you're required to have an owner's project manager. So both those items through the bid would be a $1.4 million effort. At that point, we would have a hard number, which we could then, if we time that appropriately, come to town meeting with a solid number for the construction of the facility. Again, we believe that the total cost all in would be approximately $14.9 million. I don't suspect that would change much through the two-step process, but it would allow us to have a hard bid in hand if the board decided to take that approach. So those are two potentially options to pursue the article number 15, which you have before you for the DPW.
Or we could pursue a third option, which is to withdraw altogether.
That third option is to do nothing, absolutely.
Just in ballpark, 15 million, $15 million project, so total cost with interest would probably be double that. Is it a 20 or 30-year typical amortization?
Well, I think that's probably a question for our finance team to answer as far as what would be appropriate. I think
If we looked at the preserved debt drop-off that we have in the OPEB account, plus what we may accumulate next year, probably would want to look at a 30-year, but or a 25-year,
Okay.
so that, so
my
that can
estimate-
mitigate the issue,
Yeah.
if any, on the tax rate.
So my estimate of about 15 million for interest is probably appropriate if we're going up to 25 to 30.
Actually,
Just ballpark,
Yeah.
yeah. So that means debt service annually of about $1 million.
close,
Okay.
I think at 3%, Rich estimated about, it would be about $850,000 per year, and that was in the 10-year projection that Rich provided to all of you, but that was at 13 million, so, you know, we had a really rough number at 15 million. It may be more along the lines of what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a general picture of how much we might be putting in front of people if we decided to go, you know, with a full proposal.
But as the board has done for the last several years, we're preserving debt drop-off. We're actually utilizing that on an annual basis for OPEB, and that could be then diverted to a capital project of your choosing.
So that's just an overview on that. We are prepared on February 13th, I believe.
February 13th,
To give a much more detailed presentation on all the articles for the DPW's operating budget, capital, water, and this particular one. The consultant is already penciled in that timeframe, so he'll be here as well. So we're prepared to make a much more detailed presentation on the article. It would certainly be good to know a leaning of the board in which direction you'd like to go. We do have to still draft up the article and include that in the packet for your approval as well. So it would be good to know which way to draft that article, but you know, certainly you have another opportunity in just a couple of weeks to see more detail about the project and where we stand. There was some questions last time we presented about phasing. We're presenting a detailed proposal as far as kind of what that would look like and how that would affect the cost of the project. That will all be on the 13th of February.
So, I just want to ask Ed, because are you saying that we have the potential to be able to handle this within the levy without a tax impact?
So again, and Sean is putting together the overall, or has the overall capital plan put together. So you have Cape Tech.
Well, that's my fear, and I think that's,
So it depends on which project you want to choose.
well, we don't have a choice with Cape Tech. The voters voted for it, we have to fund it, and that's my fear with.
But that could be an override. You could choose to do that as an exempt override. You could choose to fund the DPW project within, you know, almost entirely within the levy. That becomes one of the choices you have to make.
I believe, if I might, when Superintendent Sanborn comes in front of you, and I believe it's coming up, I don't know if it's on the 13th or so, it's on the form. Jay Talon, Town Council, will be here because under the provision of the Mass General Law that created Cape Tech, the board takes the vote to send a question to the ballot. So that'll be in front of you this year, if you so choose to do that. We did recently get some good news out of Cape Tech that they are gonna finance off their operating budget, essentially, the first year's interest payment. So we get a bit of a pass this year, which is really good news. But that doesn't go away, and you can take the vote either this year or next year if you wanted. But we have to be prepared for a borrowing that could be in the neighborhood, I think it's an annual, maybe 1.2 million,
That was before our enrollment dropped. So now it's about 900,000.
900,000.
Well, I personally don't want to wait, because we may have to come back with a plan B, we have to allow ample time to be able to plan for that if it doesn't pass.
So council will review that with you and just prepare you for, if you wanted to put that on for this spring's election.
It is the 13th we're coming.
It's just a lot of pieces moving, and I'm afraid you put too much before the voters and we won't get voted. So I think answering one question without knowing the other, for me, is difficult.
Understood. There is some, I mean, I've done projects over the years, and the two-phase approach that Jeff has talked about, and that my own personal opinion is it's better to take a two-step approach, because that way by the time you go to the voters, you actually know the dollar value associated with the project that's in front of you, because you've had the advantage to spend some time on the design, put it out to bid, and then at that point, if the bids aren't so good in a favorable climate, you can always reject them, and you still don't have that borrowing note out there, you know, and because mindful of the big dollar value that could be in front of people, it's nice to keep Public Works building going. Not a lot of folks probably in town know about the project. We just got an open house coming up, but this would allow it to get out in front at a low dollar value, relatively speaking, with the idea that we could come back in front of the voters at a later time with the actual dollar value to construct.
There's positives and negatives to that. The positive is we really would get a sense from the people whether or not they support it. The negative would be we spend $1.5 million and then can't get the project funded. Then we've wasted $1.5 million.
I think the voters might be apt, though, to be more willing to do it in phases, because the number's smaller and you can always opt out.
You have time to explain it to people.
Depending on the firm it
Yeah,
is.
get some grassroots.
I think that's key, Dan, and I think you're exactly right. I think there's very little understanding, knowledge at this point in the community with regard to DPW needs, and I think it's important to have some time to digest that and a full understanding of what's being asked for, and rather than having people feel like we're jamming something, a whole bunch of things down their throat all at once.
But even the $1.5 million will have to go to some type of ballot, correct? Which would
Yeah, depending how you wanted to fund it.
It depends on the debt, as Edward was talking about, debt drop off and our choices about OPEB funding, and those are choices we have to make.
And then we have the text go on top of it, and what happens is when we put too much in front of them, they just start
Well,
going no,
that's
and
exactly
then
what I was saying, yeah.
that's a fear
Right.
that, you know.
Could I, you know, I'm in favor of the design first bid and get funding approved later, but let's think about what ATM of 2019 is going to look like. With tech will be on the ballot for an override, potentially. If we do the DPW building in 2 phases, say we do design and bid this year, that would be on the ballot for either a technical override or an override for the construction. And by that time, we will have, we could very well have Manatees. That's,
Wastewater or a school operating override, or,
so, you know, I mean, how much are the taxpayers going to, you know, to bear? How much can we ask them to bear? Period, never mind all at once. I mean, that's, you know, I think
Not getting easier.
it's not, no, it won't get any easier, but I really think we have to, you know, question the wisdom of dumping everything on 2019 ATM 2020 fiscal year, I guess is what we're talking about, right, Dan?
Yeah, I think Matakees, if I recall the conversations, and we can ask for clarification tomorrow night and bring it back to the board, but they are looking to probably do much on the same schedule as Cape Tech in a fall special meeting to fund that potentially, the way the time schedule is. I do know once MSBA, we get to the final schematic design that gets submitted, and that'll come in March, we'll send that to Boston. Once that is finalized, at some point scheduled right now, I believe in September, you have to sign an agreement with MSBA as to how quickly, how many days are you going to line up the funding for that. And I don't recall if it's 90 or 120 days, but we can certainly get that information to you by tomorrow, from tomorrow's meeting.
Wow, okay, so.
Yeah, we're actually in pretty quick, you know, the idea with that is it's an 18-month schematic design concept from start to finish, and they want to keep the ball rolling. So when you finish that process, they want a committal.
You'll be ready to go.
That's correct, that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
And I'll get all that detail for you after tomorrow's meeting. But you're absolutely right that 19 looks certainly challenging.
When you, the psychology of town meeting is a little bit tricky. I mean, when you try to do too much, you risk losing everything. You know, people get override fatigue, and I just, you know, we need to be aware of that. People can only take so much.
at the same time, you know, I totally agree, but at the same time, the more we put it off, the more it's gonna cost. So that's the other side of it. It's, we have to be cognizant about it. Perhaps we need to put some type of bundle plan together and start having really.
The good news is the
There's
keep kind of
good
the conversation moving to hit off that. We don't have to make a decision tonight on that, so.
No, but I think Jeff would
Understood.
like some direction about our feelings about it,
Yes.
so Mike, do you have any feelings about the DPW facility? Or?
Well, as I said before, I think you wanted to go in 2 phases, the design first, and then depending on the figures, determine what you're gonna do from there, plus you want to split it out over different town meetings, I think. I wouldn't I think you would have as good a chance if you put it all on at the same time as one expenditure. Plus it would, I think it would kind of cramp up our options with all the other things that are coming up with the school, with Cape Tech, Keys. But I also agree with Tracy. I think we should look at not only this year but the following year and try to develop a strategy as to what we're going to do. I don't think we can consider these things in isolation of just this year, because next year will come soon enough, and the challenges on our finance department will be even greater then. So I think we have to look at it, a 2-year plan here.
Well, I think we have a 10-year plan that was just developed, and I think that's, this is a sub-part of that.
Yes.
So, we need to just make sure the numbers that we've got, the timing coincides, and take a fresh look at that when we make our decision.
Well, I agree with everything that's been said. I'm much more comfortable doing the design, breaking this up into 2 phases, doing the design, getting the cost estimates, getting that information, and spending some time educating the public. This is just one of those projects where we just can't keep putting off. I mean, we've been talking about it for a while, it's been on the drawing boards for a long time, we're gonna have to do it. The cost of the building certainly will go up if we delay it much longer, but look at what's gonna happen to vehicles. I've spent time going through the buildings, initially when I went out there, I'm thinking, oh, wait a second, maybe there's a way we could do something with the facility, maybe we don't have to get rid of this building or that building, but, after you go through it, it's a mess. It really is. Those buildings are worn. We've gotten just about everything we can get out of those buildings. Yeah, I'm also concerned about the health effects. Safety issues with town employees. I don't want to get alarmist here, but there are aspects of the buildings that are not safe. And I'm very concerned about that. So I think what we need to do is, I would recommend focusing on the design, and we have to do a big public education campaign for people. So getting the word out, explaining to people, it's terrific, an open house would be a great idea. I know the fire stations, when they often try to educate people about capital needs for fire departments, they often will have kids sitting in the seats of the fire trucks. A lot of kids would love to. I know there's a liability issue there, and I'm not promoting a particular. Exactly. No, the point is it's all about awareness and education. I agree with everything that's been said here. The voters being hit with a lot. But I do believe that the cost of not doing anything is going to be very serious on this facility. And I think what we need to do, all of us, is be heavily involved in educating the citizens of Yarmouth as to what the cost is also for not doing anything, not jumping on this. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, that's been good guidance, and we'll say that March 3rd, we're looking at that open house. We'll have a truck that will pull out.
There you go.
We want to pick that time frame because we'll still have the sanders and the plows in the trucks, and people can see how those are difficult, but they fit somewhat in our existing space. And
Make sure it's a nice rusty one.
We'll have snow displays and all those.
That's what Rooster did. Thank you, Jeff. There's no doubt, and I just want to say, no doubt there's a need there. And, we don't miss that. Unfortunately, it's just so many pieces here that we just,
Needless to say, you won't have a rain date, right? Because you want to have the people see the rain coming in.
Snow date will be 2 weeks later, and we can do it 1 week later because it's the parade, but on the 17th we'll do the snow date. But we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
As we go through, we're going to talk about some big numbers in the future in these upcoming meetings. We plan to sit down, we have a workshop meeting in September to talk about revenue potential options that we're going to need some significant guidance on for preparation for articles for the next year to get us in position to finance what's in front of us. So that is coming, a whole menu of different available elements to think about. So
And we like to think about revenue.
I could really use a few votes on that, though.
Okay.
16, and thank you, Jeff, very much. 16 and 17 are interesting articles. If I had the finance director at Centio here, you could speak to those.
Certainly. Now that we're talking, it's good timing, we're talking about some significant potential impacts on the tax rate. So what we're trying to do with 16 is get authorization, just like we do with scholarships, to allow people, if they so choose, to donate to elderly and disabled, so that we can help people out that might have some issues mitigating their tax situation. Your rate last year, increasing the elderly tax exemption to $1,000 again. We're looking at the future of the tax burden on those folks that might be at least able to support those types of things. So this is just another area where we might be able to help. The next one, any questions on that?
No, so that's basically just a box they check that's tax deductible for them, but it will go into a pot of money that will help assist in how do you determine how that's dispersed?
Yeah, so, there are some rules as it relates to this, and we'll have some article language and present that information to you. But the concept is that, this would be a form that would be administered to support the elderly and disabled.
That's awesome.
Well, we would do that. Something that our assessor Hayes, Michelle, as he was going through the items. The next one, this may not be the year, but we actually proposed a $10,000 personal property tax exemption several years ago. It was pulled, but when it was pulled, we actually had excess levy capacity because of some of the things that we did with the schools. So we weren't able to actually put this in place without any impact on the residents. So, what we'd like to do is consider this. We're looking at this being $25,000 per year savings on postage, on printing, and on labor costs that we would just take out of the town's budget if we had a $10,000 exemption. And just to put this in perspective, we have the fourth most personal property tax bills in Massachusetts. We have more personal property tax bills than the city of Boston, because most communities have passed a $10,000 exemption. We're trying to chase this money. We can't lean it, leverage it, or put it in tax title. It's basically up to the good graces of the people that actually pay these bills. Yeah.
And the people that sell their houses, they gotta clean them off at that point.
They do. Yeah. But businesses that go out of business, those types of things. So this is a mechanism where we can actually save money on a yearly basis on our operating costs. And one of the things Dan did, he challenged each one of the divisions to come up with ways to save money, and this was one of a number of things that the finance department brought forward for saving.
I did use this tool in Westfield. It's a very popular tool amongst the assessing community, and I would say, based on Ed's statistics of the fourth largest amount of personal property bills that we send out, this would be a really nice add-on to be able to do that here, understanding that impact on tax rate.
But this only applies to second homes, right?
Second homes and small businesses.
Small businesses.
How much money do we save?
We'd save $25,000 per year.
Annually? I'm sure you've calculated what the aggregate amount is. What do you think overall we save? 25, that's it?
25,000.
Okay.
We spend a lot of resource chasing very little money.
Yeah, so we're gonna
$10,
save 25 with the exemption. What do we go after? What's the target amount of money we try to collect?
100%.
No, if you collected it 100%, how much would it be?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Then we'll have that, and we'll
So
also...
look at the other side of the equation.
Yeah. What we're gonna do is we're gonna give you the actual impact on the taxes for both the second homeowners as well as the residents. How many, the number of pennies that...
Yeah, if you could break that down and show
Like,
how much
take
money
it-
we're saving, how much money we're losing, just so that we know.
We're not gonna lose any money. It's a shifting of the tax.
I know that's in your DNA, I got that, so I'm just
It's a
anxious
shifting of
to
the
see.
tax, and I think that's why people had issues with it. So it'll increase the residents' tax by fractions of a penny. And this may or may not be the year, but we just want to keep this at the forefront, that, hey, if we want to save, actual money and the expenses in the town, this is one of the options. So we'll have a presentation. Andy Machado will come before you on both of these two items, and he'll explain in detail the implications of both.
Thank you. Unless you have any other questions. Okay, items 18 through 24, Karen Green, if she could address those as a CPA-related articles.
Can I just make a request on
Yes.
that? Can we also, if Andy's gonna be doing the projections on that, have some indication of what, rather than shifting to residential, what percentage change we would have to make to the non-residential real estate tax in order to accomplish an offset?
It would be infinitesimal,
Yeah,
but
all right, but it would be interesting to know what we would need to do to accomplish that. Okay.
I'm sure the CPA is scheduled to come.
CPA is scheduled to come in on March 20th, and that's the same date as the planning board, to come with their zoning articles. So, I'll try to get the numbers right, I'm one behind. The general allocations are just the initial deposits of the general funds into the CPA buckets, housing, open space, and historic. Article 19 is funding that would go to the Affordable Housing Trust. This has been an ongoing practice that funds the programming associated with the trust. Number 20 are other housing articles. These are nonprofits, and I think the sheet that you have notes that there's 2 articles. What we've been doing for the past few years is grouping the articles of like type articles together. So you could have noted that there's the applications from HAC, Housing Assistance Corps, and HETCH is the Harwich Ecumenical Council for the Homeless. HAC's actually withdrawn their application recently and won't be looking for that funding. These are both housing rehabilitation programs in town where homeowners make application for rehab money. So unfortunately, HAC pulled. The historic projects are next. The Yarmouth Court Library is looking for funding for new windows. Our town libraries are looking for funding to digitize the Register newspaper. That one is in collaboration with Barnstable and Dennis, who have both approved their share of the funding to accomplish that.
This is a multi-year.
They're going way back. They're going all the way back. And the digitization is going to be really exceptional. The thing that struck me is it's not just the articles that are going to be part of what's digitized, but it's actually the newspaper itself. So you'll see all the advertisements that were in place way back when.
I have a question on that. I mean, have other communities already done that?
I believe so. I just don't know
They
that
can
the
send us
register
their-
has happened.
Their copy?
Oh, I don't believe that the register itself has been digitized. This is,
Okay.
and it's the register and the Barnstable Patriot.
But you said we're sharing in the expense with.
We are
Barnstable,
sharing in
so-
the expense. They've divided it in
Can imagine they
3
can't
parts
pay for it
equally.
anyway.
So the funding, the whole project that they're looking for from Yarmouth is $78,000. So it's the same from Dennis and Barnstable. A third historic project is one that the CPA committee itself hasn't voted yet to put onto the warrant, and that's the South Yarmouth Methodist Church. There are some outstanding questions with the application, as well as a ongoing lawsuit associated with CPA funding of churches. And the decision, I think it's in the Superior Court. The decision is supposed to come down end of January, but hasn't yet. So we're watching that closely.
Which community? This community? No, is
It's
this
Acton. It's
Acton? Is the Superior Court case?
I think it's the state, it's the highest court in the state.
Supreme
It's
Judicial
the
Court,
Supreme Judicial Court, it's the
SJC.
SJC.
Yeah, okay. The
That's
reason
what
I
it is.
said that is the Superior Court ruling would not be binding as
Okay.
generalized
understand.
precedent like an SJC
Okay,
case
thank you.
would.
It's SJC. So that we're watching that closely. The next article is an open space acquisition. This is 275 Route 28. It's the Yankee Village Motel. The CPA has not taken a position on that one yet either. That acquisition is still in negotiation. Article 23 is another CPA article. These are the recreation projects. You got a little preview last week. The first is the Sandy Pond master plan. This is the design and engineering associated with the Sandy Pond recreation area. And then it's funding for the pickleball courts at Flax Pond. Article 24 is another land acquisition. It's a acquisition that would be taken for recreational purposes. This is at 179 Berry Avenue.
Is that the yacht club?
That is the yacht club, and that is another case where the CPA, the CPC, the Community Preservation Committee, hasn't taken a position yet either. Negotiations are ongoing. So I imagine that the CPA will have collected all the information possible and have taken positions before they come in to see you guys at the end of March.
I have a question. Is the authorization of expenditures for capital projects that are specified in our charter, requirements, applicable to the CPA funding? In our charter, any capital project that's within the 5-year plan must be accompanied not only with timing of when the money is going to be spent, but also projections of what the capital costs are. That's a charter requirement. And yet, we've got projects here that we just discussed last week that we don't have any projections of maintenance costs on. And I just find it feels backdoor to me.
If I might, the CPA legislation is much newer probably than that provision in the charter. However, we are in the 10-year process to review the charter right now, and there's an article associated with bringing some charter revisions for it. We'll work with town council to get some kind of declaratory judgment on what that means to us. With that point considered, so.
I just object to funding capital expenditures and not having the same requirements that are in our charter apply to those expenditures.
Well, Dan was talking about, Norm, it's a good question. What I think we have to do is get clarification from town council as to the interaction of the state statute as it applies to the charter. It may override our state statute, our charter, our local provision. So I think we have to get, I don't know the answer to that question.
Well,
I'm kind of betting it does,
We'd have to harmonize it.
but I think we should get legal clarification on that.
just because it does, doesn't mean we have to act that way.
Well, that's true too.
We can require anybody coming before us to make those kinds of presentations.
And that would be a policy decision, because the converse obviously would apply too, and that would be that just because the charter says something, we don't have to follow it if we're not legally obligated to follow it. So we'd have to have that discussion and see what policy if we wanted to adopt the policy that you're talking about, and that is respecting what the charter says.
So are you asking for a maintenance plan with the pickleball presentation, is that what you're asking?
Absolutely.
And that's being worked on.
Okay.
But the larger question, we'll work on that as well as it relates to the charter versus the
So
city.
we don't want to have a conflict.
Thank
Thank you, Karen.
you. Items 25 through 29 are related to the marijuana situation, which I had a briefing on not too long ago. And that'll be back in front of us one last time to clarify what we're going to do with those, but we have definitely a strategy mapped out for that. Item 30, if Karen could come back and address that with the planning board.
So Article 30 is, so yeah, the planning board only has the 4 articles this year. And Article 30 is around Section 404 of the motel bylaw. And this was the bylaw that they've been discussing. I think they had a conversation with you, because I remember Eric's comments. And the purpose of this article is to change the provision around conversion projects of motels to affordable housing. And it strikes those provisions from the bylaw so that only raise and replace projects can move forward.
Does miscellaneous zoning amendments really meet the criteria of our placeholder?
Well, these are, oh, go
I
ahead.
think those are housekeeping
These are
measures.
the
Yeah.
housekeeping articles, which are,
And they're all in one article?
it's how we've been doing it the last, I know this is the way we did it last year, and I'll bet it was the same the prior year. So these are kind of small edits that have come out in large part. I was talking with Kathy, out of site plan review and comments that just help to clarify the bylaw. The first are, and I'll go through each of them for you. The first are edits to allow for bus shelters in the front yard setback and to ensure minimum buffers for reduced front yard setback requirements. So this
We just had a scenario with that proposal.
we did.
Yeah.
We did, so that's a perfect example where the issue came up, and we didn't really have a good, written guidance, and the zoning bylaw changes would provide that. Second part, housekeeping to match foot candle requirements at driveways, to that's currently included. And the marijuana establishments and RMD bylaws. So this is just, I think that's an edit. That's wrong, I'm sorry, my apologies. This is, the foot candle, or the lighting, is the lighting, Eric can probably help me. The lighting that goes beyond the property lines. And the change to the bylaw is so that the footlight candle measurement that's made at the property line itself, where you'd enter a driveway, could be brighter than everywhere else. So these are small. Housekeeping, third one is housekeeping to ensure compliance with design standards for the entire property. You'll remember that a few years ago, we changed the zoning bylaw so that the design provisions that were part of the hotel motel overlay zoning pertain to the whole site, not just where the building was changing. This makes it so the design requirements in a VCOD apply to the entire VCOD project. Just had a couple come through. Unfortunately, they're on green properties, they're not redevelopments, and we needed to clarify that the design standards apply to the whole property. The last housekeeping article is around bicycle standards in the VCOD, and a similar situations. We had a small VCOD project come in. It's actually the Kinlan Grover across from Town Hall. There's provisions in the VCOD bylaw that pertain to bicycle access and flow and whatnot. This property is small, and the bicycle provisions really don't pertain. So we're making that clarification in the bylaw. I think the planning board will do much better justice than I have.
No, it's early, so I know they're all through the process now. They probably haven't even had their public hearing.
They haven't had their public hearing yet. I think their public hearing is scheduled for March 7th. So what's nice is they'll go through the public hearing process, have those comments, and then come back to you guys.
And what's the deadline for printing?
It was in the memo,
It's
probably
late March.
late March, yeah. We're gonna have, it's all set up in
Yeah,
the
it's right at the
agenda
very
ahead,
end.
so that we'll finish this off before then.
So the public hearing will take place prior to that,
Oh,
so that the changes can be
Yes,
incorporated.
absolutely. And even if changes come out of your meeting on the 20th, I think that the changes could be
Yeah, because we want to
scheduled.
have the warrant printed up for the month of April for sure, so we want to go to print by the end of March.
Perfect. Anybody have any questions for us?
A candle description.
Say that for later.
Yeah.
32, land disposition, there's a piece of small parcel of property, Compass Drive, that I'd like to dispose of and be able to be in a position to sell it to an abutter, is my understanding.
We'll get more detail on that.
Yes, you'll get more detail. There was, I believe this was packaged with some land from last year.
It was bundled up. The voters said they didn't want to do that, they wanted to act on parcels individually, so this
Okay, good
is
comment.
in response to that.
There's a number of parcels like this across the town, so we're working on a land disposition presentation to you for a later date, because some of them are a little bit more complicated to dispose of than others, and we're gonna need some guidance on that.
Anybody have any comments on that? Okay.
Wastewater, 33, the 208 plan, this is similar to the article from last year, $200,000 to continue our effort associated with wastewater planning. This is a big year for us. We did receive the grant from the state. We will be looking to schedule a meeting. Right now it's tentatively March 22nd with Dennis in Harwich to kick off the regional efficiency grant and in earnest to move this year on that planning effort. So this will continue our work towards finishing up the 208 plan and any other work that comes down the line. We also, as part of that grant, have $50,000 to work with Barnstable, and that's going to be a situation where there's going to be some engineering needed there, because that's a little bit complicated as well, for sure, because they're going to need a plant expansion, and we're going to need effluent exchange idea to come through there, so that'll help us continue planning towards that direction as well.
On that one,
Yes.
just a quick question, Madam Chairman. I think one of the things that I would like to see at least discussed, and potentially come out of it, is at least a framework for the two towns to agree to work together with respect to the preservation of the Lewis Bay watershed. You know,
Right.
when we talk about the problems in Lewis Bay, 60-some-odd% of the land area contributes indirectly into the bay, and that's in Barnstable, that is. So I think my hope is that an outcome in this can be not only collaboration when it comes to clean water or wastewater, sort of the facility side of it, but I think there needs to be more of a dialogue between the two towns as to how we can work together to make sure that the pollution issues in Lewis Bay are properly addressed. Certainly we have some priorities, but you know, Barnstable, I'd like to see Barnstable actually quite frankly do more.
We've, just to let you know, we've been dialoguing with the Barnstable team, with Manager Els and Public Works Director over there, and a couple of other staff members related to furthering those conversations. And also, I think in principle, we've agreed about that dialogue associated with Lewis Bay. And preservation, we could certainly work in some kind of inter-town agreement to override what we're going to do there related to water cleanliness and pollution. We have been dialoguing pretty regularly.
That's good, because I think the water agreement comes up again in May, if I'm not.
It does, and actually that was on our conversation last week. They agreed to get something over to us in a timely fashion so that we can act on it before it expires.
Hopefully it's more than a week.
All right, the second part of the wastewater is a placeholder, which we're working on language now related to the three towns developing similar language that could empower a home rule petition, if voted in favor of that, to go to Boston, that would allow the towns to begin the process of establishing some kind of municipal entity that would become the regional, for lack of a better phrase, help me so enforce, with Clean Water Partnership.
Right, we're talking about a clean water partnership between the three towns.
So it's a home rule request. It's modeled after Mansfield, Norton, and Foxborough. And that could languish up in Boston for a while, but at least when it gets acted on by the legislature and signed by the governor, it would bless any agreement we come up with at the local level. And it would be something that at the local level, when we get an agreement struck, if we're that fortunate, we come back to town meeting at a future meeting to put that agreement in front of the town. Each town trying to do it all in the same time frame with each other, so.
And all three towns have to have the exact same.
That's correct,
wording.
yes.
Okay.
Okay, and along that line, so I had mistakenly informed you that potentially you are the sewer commissioners. We have been going through the archives. We have not yet been able to find any town meeting vote that empowered that, or adoption of mass general law that could empower that. So if anybody has any recollection of what that might have been, we have searched high and low.
Ask Mr. Kelly.
Worst comes to fruition, we will put a document in front of you for an article that would empower adoption of that mass general law that would create the board being the sewer commissioners, if you will.
I do know that the water commissioner, that
That's
is
correct.
definitely there, but I don't know if we've ever,
There was some language we found that was related to financing articles and whatnot, but nothing that adopted that provision in the general law, so we'll work on that to get that in front of you. The next one, 36 and 37, as you know, will be in front of you March 6th for an update on the golf situation with the elements of a proposed turnaround plan there. Part of that could include location of some type of reuse of the landfill cap. In order to reuse it for anything, we actually have to reverse the Article 97 process. It's complicated, but it was recently done as recently as last year in the town of Lincoln, so we're going to communicate with them, and it gives us a pretty good blueprint as to how to do that and the steps needed, but that's probably going to be like a 2-year process. So we may end up not putting an article in front of you and wait till next town meeting, but I wanted to make sure at least we have that opportunity if things go are trending positively. So number 38 is the stretch code. We're due to be back in front of you. I believe it's on March 13th. It's on the look-ahead schedule for a stretch code adoption with Sean will lead that up with Mark Grills. Sean has some information you met recently. He gave a presentation to Cape Cod Builders Association, and we'll have some language there for you at that time for that article. Chris has been heading up the charter change group. They have had some meetings and have prepared some elements for consideration for a charter change. That's, remember, every 10-year requirement to reconvene the group. We had an ad hoc committee established, and they, the moderator recently empowered the group as according to the charter, and they've been working on that. So we'll give you an update at a later date.
and that work will be completed. I thought that work was like 18-month work.
No, well, so we've been meeting, I think, since October, maybe?
Yeah, we've been meeting, so it needs to pass this year in order to get up to the legislature,
Yeah.
for the legislature to enact the changes in order for it to take effect
Up to
by
maybe
2020.
Yeah, 2 years later.
But we'll be prepared to have it, the work of the charter review committee complete before the warrant goes.
That's the plan, yes. So we just had confirmation that the charter committee will be meeting on March 13th to review and hopefully vote on proposed changes. We will, those changes will be brought before the board for your approval the following Tuesday.
That's quick.
It's an efficient group.
Well, yeah, I mean, in comparison to past years, it's been quite
It's
a
been a pleasure to
process
work
of
with.
involving the public and some significant changes.
But the last thing I'll add on that is that the majority of the proposed changes or suggested changes that the committee is looking at are very minor wording modification in nature, so it's not very substantial in terms of actual changes to the charter function of the government.
And, thank you, Chris. Items 40 through 42, I sent a memo on that. Those are citizen-driven petition requests. And if anybody has any questions on those, I can field it for you.
Nope, the petitioners will all have their opportunity to come before
That's
us and
Mm-hmm.
make a presentation. Okay, with that, we need to,
The motion to close is what was done last year.
well, we need to place the articles in. Open, place, and close. I know Linda and I went back and forth about that, but, I know how we've done it historically. I'm not sure, I did read the charter, and the charter talks about closing and placing.
Closing and placing, so there was a motion last year to close and place the items. That's right, no open. If you wanted though, on that topic, in discussing with this with Phil, who talked about with some other town clerks, it would be the first meeting after the
That you
annual town
open it.
meeting that you could announce
Yeah,
that
but we
with
never
the process.
formally did that.
Well,
we don't-
there's been no requirement to do that,
Right, right.
correct?
Well, I guess it's just, for me, it's about notifying the
Understood.
public
Absolutely.
about their opportunity and when the process kind of
Yeah,
starts.
January 5th, of course, the citizens have to get their article to us, right?
Which is done.
Which is done. And I think that makes sense to do that, so we can put that on an agenda.
Change, but in our event, it's about just under $14.6 million. We'll go over that in a little bit of detail. Our ambulance fund, the receipts from the ambulance go to a separate fund, and in the past has been used to subsidize the fire department operation in the amount of $1.2 million. With the addition of the proposed 4 new firefighters, that's been increased to $1.3 million, which is a sustainable recurring amount based on the last several years of history. You might recall 3 or maybe 4 years ago now, we took advantage of a new program offered through the state that allows us to submit a cost report for ambulance billing, and that's a recovery through Medicare of addition, and it's been amounting to about $100,000 a year. And so we've been getting that for several years now, and we actually just got a desk audit of our report that we submitted, and we're clear, and we'll be receiving that money again this fiscal year by the end of June. So that money easily enough accounts for this increase from 1.2 to 1. Every year.
Can I just ask a question on that, though? You're going from an actual of 1.6 to a projected 1.3. Why do you think that would be reduced?
And this is why I mentioned to you that the 18 includes all items. So, for instance, in the capital article 8 or 9, whichever, wherever it lands, sometimes that includes funding
The payments?
for capital items above and beyond the 1.2 million. So if the fire department had an ambulance purchase in a particular year funded through those ambulance receipts, that would be in the 1.6. But the base has always been 1.2 on the operating budget. Enterprise costs borne by the general fund. These are the indirect costs, administrative costs for water, septic, golf.
That's income.
Right.
That's income.
So these are costs identified, borne by enterprise funds, but budgeting and payment purposes, they're paid for out of the general fund, so it's kind of like a reimbursement. So it's an offset. No change there. And free cash is showing 0 because those are the articles that you'd be talking about. To the extent you authorize or want to vote them, generally they're going to come from a free cash or other available fund, and they would show there at the time that they're adopted. At this point, they're self-balancing. We're trying to balance the operating budget with the tax and other revenues we have that are recurring. So non-recurring items aren't in there at this point. All other available funds, those are things like the ferry tax fee. We get a small amount of 50 cents, I think it is, or 75 cents for every ticket the steamship authority sells through Hyannis. Goes into a separate fund by law, and we can appropriate that. So we have a couple little funds like that, and those generate a recurring revenue of about $117,000.
How much can we get from ferry tax
I think it's 50 cents a ticket.
overall?
Overall, I think this is at about 40 or 45 grand a year. So the total of non-tax sources is just over 18 million, 18.1 million, which means the rest has to come from the property tax levy, as 60,043,000. Of course, that has to fit within our levy limit, and the good news is it does. And you've got an extra $300 to spend if you so choose. Here's what makes up that local estimated receipts. As I think I told you as we leading up to this, we're pretty tight on our local estimated receipts. And you see the note at the bottom that I put under the totals that the FY19 budget, any individual line item perhaps you could question or look at or analyze. But the bottom line is we collected almost $15.3 million in FY17 actual receipts. And for FY19, we're budgeting just under 14.6. We're about 95% of our actuals. So to the extent there's a cushion, so to speak, we've got a 5% cushion. And as I think I've told you in the past, the big concern would be in an economic downturn is those top 3 line items, motor vehicle excise, meals, and room tax. And those have a sensitivity of 10 to 15% in an economic downturn. So a 5% cushion, if you have a bad downturn, might not necessarily cover you. But the idea is hopefully you can forecast that or identify that and phase into it or phase out of it, as the case may be, over a period of 2 or 3 years. Other available funds. So what I just showed you was the operating fund. Dan mentioned that you do have some items on your agenda coming up talking about free cash asks. And so these will be for one-time items that are non-recurring in nature and therefore can be funded from non-recurring revenues such as free cash. We also have a couple of articles that were not utilized. For example, fire department stretchers, we got a free cash grant last year. But as it turns out, we were successful in getting a grant and therefore didn't need to spend the free cash. So that can either just be closed out and returned back, or this is an opportunity now to evaluate whether you want to reappropriate it for something else. And so the total of those is about $3.2 million. And those are the ideas that Dan will be coming back to you, presenting to you for what you may want to fund with that $3.2 million. Some of the ideas are, obviously we have contingencies. Generally, Article 1 is contingencies for the current fiscal year. We do have some ideas about where we need to be with reserves, whether it's unrestricted stabilization, OPEB, or capital stabilization. We have some ongoing planning efforts, clean water or otherwise. We do have some ideas for administrative efficiency improvements that with a little bit of funding, perhaps we can jumpstart and get some improvements going. And then some non-recurring service enhancements are generally items up for discussion as well. So, that's for balance, that's good. We got some other good news before I give you the bad news. We have received our health insurance rates for FY19, and we've been, as you might recall, in my 10-year projection, the thing driving the deficit in the outer years was increases in employee benefit costs, and we were forecasting 10% for health insurance, and I think it was 6 or 8% for pensions, something like that. Health insurance, our rates are only 6% for FY19, as opposed to the 10 that was projected. So we're doing better than what had been in recent years. So that's good news. That savings, as we get through the rest of the budget process, we can utilize that savings to balance things out that might not be so favorable. Cape Cod Tech Assessment, we just got, was that today or yesterday? Yesterday. And that's coming in lower than the actual assessment from last year, where we provided for a 2.5% increase. So it's a good chunk of money that's available there to mitigate any other, again, not so favorable news that we may get. And the financing of the Cape Cod Tech construction, we won't need to actually provide for that until FY 2020. The bad news, we do have a proposed budget that will be going through the review and discussion process from DY, and that asks for a 6.17% increase, and again, we provided for our 2.5%. Our 2.5% increase from last year's assessment was about $770,000. So you can do the math. 6.17 is a little more than almost 3 times 2.5, so that gives you the magnitude of the issue we might be facing.
What's the total budget, the DY budget?
61 million.
61 million, so if we, enrollment shift, it comes out at 8%, then we're looking at.
Well, that's my next bullet point there. So you got, all things being equal as last year, which is not, but if they were, and you went up 2.5%, that'd be 770,000. If you're going up 6%, that's closer to 2 million.
Well, that's a preliminary.
And then
so
it's
we'll
a
work on
preliminary.
from there.
And so I said that's going through the review process. But that's not all the news when it comes to receiving a regional school district assessment. The devil's in the details because of an enrollment shift, as Norm mentioned. So in addition to a increase in the budget, we do also understand that Dennis has lost students and Yarmouth has gained students, which will affect the percentage at which the total cost of the budget is apportioned between the two towns. So those two forces will have a significant impact on the final balancing of this budget. We're working on that now to see what that looks like, and we'll update you when we have more information. And the last challenge I have listed here is the golf operation. Right now, that operation is not balanced. The revenues versus the expenses on an operating basis. And so we have a series of meetings and some reviews coming up internally to look at how we can rectify that and address that going forward. There's a lot of topics to talk about on that front, so a lot to consider.
We plan on being in front of you March 6th with the latest on that budget and then a turnaround plan.
Looking forward to it.
I want to leave you, except for your questions, I'll leave you with, that's the current status of 19. It wasn't too long ago, I was in front of you with the 10-year projection. And this is the reminder of what the 10-year projection is telling us. So through next year, it looks reasonably decent, absent educational increases. And with a 6% increase on health insurance instead of a 10%, that looks plausible. And then the subsequent year and second year out, third year out are less. So that's our trend. Dan mentioned to you revenue workshop and ideas for revenue generation. So that's one side of the equation, and the other side of the equation is tough decisions on spending. So I guess that's where I'll leave it. It gives you a quick update where we are, and then of course if you have any questions, we're happy to take them now or respond to them as you get them through Dan.
Go ahead.
Question on, we forecast our local estimated receipts pretty conservatively. What is the risk if we were designating some of free cash to cover an operating deficit, not an operating deficit, a school assessment, and letting that play out against future revenue excesses over budgeted plans or budgeted receipts? What's the risk involved in that? Have we looked at the typical economic flows and said, okay, well, if in a poor economic turn, how much of a drop-off could we expect in revenues, and where would that leave us?
There's a lot in that question.
I know there is, and I don't expect an offhanded answer, but we've, over the last 2 or 3 years, we've experienced significant free cash realization, primarily because of excess of local receipts or total receipts compared to our plan or our budget.
And so let me address that. So
Yeah.
we start there, maybe perhaps. So of those excess receipts, and I don't know the exact number, but I'm going to guess if it came back and reported to you at the end of the fiscal year, somewhere between 1 and 1.5 million in savings and estimated local receipts. The vast majority of it is motor vehicle excise, rooms, and meals.
Okay.
So
So that's the.
that's your risk.
Risk, right.
Those are the three most sensitive
Mm-hmm.
to economic decline and improvement. And that's also where you're generating your savings. So, and one of the reasons if you recall, I show you the top 10 revenue generators for free cash and the top
Right.
10 appropriation savings, is so you get a sense of where they're coming from. And it's not coming from a lot of different areas. It's coming from one or two winners that really kind of put us over the edge. That if you didn't have, or if they didn't come through, it wouldn't be as rosy a picture. So I think it's, I'm not sure that we're budgeting our revenues that conservatively. Like I said, we're at 95%. But that's really banking on motor vehicle and rooms and meals coming through.
I want to just add that when you look at the entire amount of the free cash being generated, that's not entirely from expenses, or entirely from local receipts.
Right.
We've been scouring every account to clean up every dollar that we could find, and that ends up finding its way to free cash. So now
Those
we're,
one-timers.
those are one-timers,
Yeah.
not necessarily reoccurring. And so, for example, the tax title, that gravy train's done.
Right.
Some of the other things that Rich and his team have done, those have been cleaned up as well. So, those types of levers that we've already pushed, won't be there. And I think you may recall that we were at one point at $200,000 in the stabilization reserve.
Right.
And one of the things that S&P looks at when we do all of this large borrowing that we're thinking about is, is your budget structurally balanced? So if you apply free cash to your budget, then your budget is not structurally balanced. So we could be jeopardizing our bond rating.
If I might just also add, one of the things that I think we need to start preparing for is the Cavalier site's under construction now. That's 69 units of affordable housing. Probably you're looking at 100 kids at least out of that situation, and shortly behind that will be the next project. 40 units, probably you're talking 30 to 50 more kids. The delta between DY is projected, Dennis, to continue to decline enrollment, and those two projects will accelerate the introduction of children into the school district. So I think two things stand out to me. One is the importance of what we're doing now with the DY negotiation, and then certainly the opportunity that four-grade solution with Nattakey's offers to us to bring some semblance of balance back into the system to some degree, but that clearly, those affordable housing projects could really make life within the next 5 years very difficult.
Well, there is a requirement that a substantial portion of those households come from Yarmouth that go into those developments. So I would hope that as a result, it wouldn't be additive. If we're able to reach the goal, and that is somewhere around 70% of the housing would be provided to Yarmouth residents, that would mean that the potential change in enrollment resulting from those might be, attributable to 30% of the families. And, so, I'm not looking at that as pessimistically from the standpoint of, just looking at the totals.
I'm not sure if the housing production plan on that called for 70% resident, usually about like 39.
They both have local preference attached to them.
How much
So it's
percentage is
70% is the maximum that's allowable. It could go down slightly, but that's what we're shooting for sure.
So of course, if you don't have that, there'll be pressure to rent it.
But what will happen, though, is where they're living now will be unoccupied in Yarmouth, and then other folks may actually fill into where they vacated.
But the rentals in those situations are probably, going to be adjusted upward.
Kara, does that preference hold once those initial tenants move on?
I believe it does. You're saying from the initial rent up, like,
Yeah, suppose the initial person's from Yarmouth and they move to Falmouth, let's say, does the person that replaced them get preference if they're?
I believe so.
Well, personally, I think having more families move back here and stay here is a significant benefit. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
it will be hard. I think we should be planning for that, as Dan talked about, in our future planning, but we have to have a balance, and we're losing that balance. So hopefully it does create more families here. That's my hope. Hopefully we can plan to accommodate for that shift in population in the schools.
The bedroom mix at those two developments too is heavier on the 1 and 2s bedrooms as opposed to the 3 bedrooms, which are kind of more appropriate for a family.
Well, I think we do have to work towards getting more families here, but we also have to plan for it, because when you see these spikes shift, that's where we have more difficulties. And to Dan's point, these negotiations, I think, with where that balance is when we're at 80%, of the school population, what happens at that point, things like that.
Close the loop on Norm's question. Norm, if you go back to that free cash presentation, Ed's point, there was a metric in there that I added, I think it was this year, and it was 2 years now. We're trying to get a AAA so we can minimize our borrowing costs for the borrowing we've come forward. One of the metrics is general fund net result, and a lot of that's measured by free cash generation.
5%.
And so I have a comparison of where we are to what the S&P expectation is, and so that might be helpful to you.
Are we close?
We were close the last 2 years.
Close.
The follow-up question the S&P always has when we say we're close or looking good on something is, what's it look like next year and in the future?
Right.
And they want to see a demonstrated track. We might punt on that particular item, but we can't be in a negative situation where we're actually, funding operations with free cash. They just will not. That's one of the key issues that they look at. Is your budget structurally balanced with current year revenues versus current year expenses?
And I think as we go forward in the budget presentation, you're going to hear from some folks that they would like to see more money in their particular budgets because, everything's a balance and active prioritizations. And I heard pretty loud and clear that some folks want some more money in some areas, and you're going to hear about it. So it's just a function of how much we have. That's the decision we have to make.
Well, it's great when times are good, but when when the projections fall short, it's hard when you have to lay people off. That's the thing that we've always been very, very cautious about. And we work with a lean work staff. Unfortunately, we're really fortunate to have such a great team, but we've been through that. We've used free cash. We've had a lot more people that we've had to, and that costs money too. So it's such a balance in that.
The only thing I'll say that takes solace on that, there's very few communities in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts who aren't in the position that we're in there. There's probably less than 10% that can string a budget together, meet all the needs that they have in front of them without batting too much of an eye. We're all pretty much in the same boat.
Anything else for Rich? Thank you for that synopsis. It's always helpful. So moving on to the town administrator annual review, at your place tonight was, I tried to do it kind of like Eric had done it in the past, and I took everybody's and I put them all in there, I totaled them and I averaged them. It's not weighted. Don't strike out the highs and lows. It's added and divided by 5. It's just that simple, and then added down and divided by 5. So the good news is, I think that Dan came up with a 3.08 rating, which is over superior, I think, for his first year. That's a really good rating. There were comments submitted by both Norm and Mark. I don't know how you guys want to do it. Do you guys want to discuss in detail? Do we want to go down in each category and talk about it, or do you guys just want to make comments? It's completely up to you.
I'm happy with comments.
Okay, sure, all right. Mark, we'll start with you.
I don't really have anything to add to the report. I did make a couple of comments here, but I don't,
They're at the end, yep.
I think it's more in the lines of collaboration involving the board and the administrator. I've mentioned this before about communication platforms and the website, media, TV, Facebook, and finding ways to better connect local residents to what's going on in our community and some of the decisions that we have to make. We talked before about all the big decisions that we have to make in the future. And the reality is our biggest challenge is going to be bringing the community along with us as we wrestle with these. And it's not like we have a great deal of time. These are big decisions that have to be dealt with in a relatively short period of time. So I've mentioned this before, I just flashed it again. I'm not interested in having a discussion unless others might think so, but I just reaffirmed a couple of points that I tend to harp on a pretty regular basis. And I mean, and you know, I appreciate, I know there's been improvement. I don't want to dismiss that. Efforts being made, there's more social media stuff going on, there's more Facebook activity going on. There's a part of me that would just like to clone Steve Exaros and just have them like right there in town.
I don't think I can afford that, I'm not sure.
No, but the point is that it's that kind of presence. The community's well aware of a lot of things that are going on in the police department. I'd like to sort of get us to, in the other departments, there's a lot of good work going on in a lot of departments and committees, what we're doing, the things that come before us. You know, so getting that information out to the community at large, I just think is an incredibly important priority. And so as we hit milestones with respect to DPW facilities, milestones in terms of financial planning, or decision-making points with respect to some of the other big projects that are out there ahead of us, the more ways we can keep people informed as to what we're doing. I just think there are things that we can do. We've talked about it, and I just am anxious to see all this stuff be a higher priority. So it wasn't so much a complaint about Dan, it's sort of like how can we work together to sort of find a way to continually make that a priority. So just an observation. So that's all I really want to say at this point.
Mike?
I think his overall rating, especially if someone's coming into the position new, to get a superior rating after 1 year is you ought to really feel terrific about that. That's an outstanding. The only person I know that gave people straight fours was Jim Quirk. And he wanted to make sure he wanted to make sure that Bill got his bonus. So I've always said to Jim that I was going to do a fundraiser down at Smuggler's Beach and have Bill walk across the water to West Dennis, because fours, I mean, that pretty much implies there's no room to go, and I never met that person yet, but and I mean that for everybody in every occupation. I mean, I think the time you don't think you can get any better at what you do is the start of the decline.
I want equal time on that.
But the only grades that he got below the 3 levels and was in oral communication, which was like 2.8, close enough. I think your oral communication's fine. The other is written communication, and that was hard to evaluate, Dan, because most and I think it has to do with the questionnaire itself. Most of your writing has to do with short, relatively cryptic memos, and it's very difficult when you're seeing those kinds of almost soundbite communications, which is what we do over emails and things like that. It's very hard to evaluate, because the category says lacks ability, well, let me put it this way, the superior one has very good understanding, uses correct grammar, and diction which is appropriate for the purpose, no need for, you know. The other thing is that implies that everybody here really understands grammar well and is a good writer. I'm not so sure that's true either. But the one thing that I'm going to throw out in terms of improvement, and I hope you don't take this personally, but I can only evaluate you in terms of the other people that I've worked with, the other administrators. And one thing that I thought Bill Henchy was really did very, very well is keeping the board advised of things as they developed, as they moved along. I don't think since he left, anyone has done that as well as he has. And just to use an example, and I hope you don't take this as a criticism, but the Vineyard Wind thing. You know, you heard the public, they came in, they asked questions. Selectmen, when did you first find out about this? And we really found out about it at the tail end of the process. I'm not implying any deviousness or anybody trying to do anything inappropriately, but just using that as an example, if we received communications about what negotiations were going on, the general sense of things, because the public, rightly or wrongly, expects us to know everything. And when there's something like a project comes up and they say, well, how come the board didn't know about this? It really doesn't look very good for us. And so I would say that that's in addition to writing publishable prose, that would be an area where your scores could even go higher. But overall, Dan, if I were you and I got a 3 for being in this, and by the way, I just want to say the composite score I gave you was a 3, and I didn't take into account that you were here a year, or how I just looked at that as if, you know, the same as if you were here 5 years or whatever. If I factored that in, my scores would even be higher. So I think you did a really good job, and I think your scores reflect that.
Mark, I'll let you respond.
Just real quick.
Are we finished?
No, I just want to know when we're doing the fundraiser.
Yeah.
We can do it with the polar bear funds, man.
There you go. There you go. No, I that's the reason, one of the reasons that factored into my vote is because he's only been here a year. We're not an easy group of people to figure out. It takes some time. I'm making an adaptation. So I think he's
harder than others.
What's that? Yeah, and the other thing you have to understand is this board, I haven't worked with them, but in your capacity as selectman, but the reality is you had 2 top-notch
That never got forced.
Huh?
That never got retained a 4.
All right. Well, I would have given them 4s.
Yes.
All right. The reality is Bob Lawton, an incredible talent, a dean of town managers around the state, and the same with Bill. So I think this town has been lucky to be served by some great administrators, both in the past and I think right now. So thank you.
Thank you. Norm.
We've talked an awful lot about communication, and I think the assumption here is that people know, people who are watching this, there are any interested parties, know what the hell we did here in this evaluation. And I think that I need to spend a minute or 2 talking about the evaluation process. Each of the board members prepared an evaluation based on 10 different criteria, and rating those from unsatisfactory for 0 through 4.
That's 11.
11,
I just
sorry.
want to make sure I didn't
That's
have
why he
it.
got so low.
Different count.
I was gonna say, why divided by 11?
Maybe you have 11, I had 10. I had 10. But rating from 0 to 4. So, and the composite on on Dan's total rating came out at 3.08. So, and that is at the superior level. The 4 levels are 0, unsatisfactory, and in that case, Dan wouldn't be here. 1, needs improvement. 2 is satisfactory. 3 is superior, and 4 is exceptional or outstanding. So those are the levels that we rated Dan's performance at. The categories are knowledge of the job, productivity, decision-making, oral communication, written communication, budget and financial administration, leadership, public relations, work relationships, and staff development and training. And I think it's a, you know, you can, it's another one on the next page. All right.
That's the
Verse number 11.
And number 11, that's why I didn't have it. And personnel practices. And, you know, we can quibble about whether this is a good or bad form, but in my experience, this is a pretty comprehensive series of areas related to general management. In my particular case, you know, the overall rating that I gave Dan was 3.2. I thought, Dan, you had an outstanding year, a very strong performance in my view. You know, we certainly worked together on a number of things directly, in particular the negotiations with Dennis on the regional agreement. I really valued your counsel and found it very valuable along the way. Certainly had, and continue to have, I think, an appreciation for not only where our town is, but also what Dennis's interests are in the negotiation process. I think the reorganization proposals that you presented were thoughtful, and I think you could have just chosen to say, well, when we can have an organization that will function effectively as it is for the next 5 years, so you know, why make any changes? But I think you gave good thought to what was needed for the town. I think suggesting that we spend some additional money is, I think, something we should have done a while ago with regard to the human resources position. I think you brought that to the fore, and I think that's to your credit. I'm trying to think about some of the other comments that I made, but I did make written comments in addition to the rating that I provided. So again, overall, I think a very strong performance, and appreciate your efforts for the town.
Dan, I think overall you've done very well. You know, I do have some criticism, which I will hope you will take constructively, and I'll be happy to offer those to you in private. I don't see any point in airing them out in public. That's not really my style. But you know, I will admit, you know, when you came here, I had very high hopes and don't take this the wrong way, but low expectations. And the low expectations were not because I didn't think you could do the job, it's because you hadn't done the job before. And you know, I have been here for 9 years. I've been here since our stabilization was at 200,000. Of those 9, I was the chairman for 6, and I probably graded you the toughest, and that's not your fault. That's just because I worked side by side with 3 different town administrators for 6 years. So, you know, I got to see their strengths and weaknesses, and to be perfectly honest, I probably scored you as compared to them. So, you know, I didn't give you any scores of 4, and to be quite honest, it was difficult for me to give you scores of 3, not because you didn't do a good job, but because I think it's difficult to call anyone's performance in the first year of a job that they hadn't ever done before superior. I think that satisfactory would have been a good score for an average score of satisfactory would have been a good score for someone in your position, but you certainly did better than that, and I think you deserve the compiled average that you got. I think that's right where you are, where you should be, with some room for improvement. Everybody has room for improvement, but just to summarize, overall very pleased with your performance. And I know that you work hard. I know that you get out in the community, try to be seen. We've seen the polar opposite with other town administrators who just as soon lock themselves in their offices and never come out. But that's fine too. People just have different styles. So thank you for all your hard work. You should know that it is appreciated, and I look forward to the next year.
Thank you.
I don't have really much to say. I guess I do get a little bit more of an opportunity every once in a while to talk to Dan. I guess my comments kind of fall in line with Mike. It's hard to score using this because where I scored the lowest was in communication. And it doesn't really speak to oral or written communication specifically. It's just the finesse of finding a way to, there's a lot of different, I guess, chords that go out and come back, and finding the skill to inform us so we're not surprised about things, inform staff so that they feel they're getting the information both upwards and downwards. It's not an easy task by any means. I'm not saying it is. But I think, certainly what I've seen is improvement. And I think it will be built upon as you kind of get to know the community better and how it works and what our expectations are. I think it will come in time. So I'm very happy with our hire. I'm very happy with the progress that we've made in the year. I do think that in terms of communication, there is room for improvement. Having said that, there's pieces, as Eric said, we've had a town administrator who was, in my opinion, a financial genius, but not really open door policy, which is something that this board felt very strongly about, and I feel like we're getting back to that. You're meeting with citizens, you're out in the public. We are starting to inform the public better on social media. We're making progress on very many fronts. And one thing that as we go through this and we go through a year, and you think of all the topics and all the issues that you deal with, it's amazing that one person can handle really, from the flood to sharks, to senior services, to recreation, to public safety, to roads. It's a significant amount of information and just things that you have to deal with, and it's not an easy task. And so I appreciate the work that you've done. I look forward to continuing to work with you and your team. I think you're continuing the team mentality, and I think we need to continue that. But if I had one thing to say, and it's hard to score it in written or oral, but it's more in just the general flow of communication to us. So we're not surprised about issues and keeping us just abreast of what's going on. Often I'm kind of taken back by things I didn't know anything about. So I'd like that to smooth over, but other than that, I think it was a great year.
Thank you. Can I?
Yes, absolutely, please.
I want to thank the board for that very thoughtful evaluation and dialogue with some more than others. And what I can tell you, to Selectman Stone's point, in Selectman Talley's point, moving into this form of government is a significant challenge without having any apprenticeship or anything. I want to thank Bob Lawton, who was just absolutely fabulous. Had great counsel with Bob. Bill Henchy, we had some great dialogue. You know, he left a lot, he and Bob both left a big shadow here in the town, very fortunate to be served by those two individuals. But I can't say enough about the team of individuals that this town has that goes to work every day, because any leader is successful solely related to the team. And this team that particularly from the top level of management, from finance all the way down to, you know, our newest employees, we continue to try to build that team atmosphere. But there is a singular commitment to improvement here that is refreshing, and that, you know, the effort that they put in day in and day out in very challenging environments. These aren't jobs for the faint of heart, but they have made my job that much easier to do. So I want to thank them all publicly for that, because as you had mentioned, there is one of the challenges, or one of the things that attracted me to Yarmouth was this town does a lot of things, and that gives me a challenge to be able to sit at the table for a period of time to work on all the things that we need to work on and be interested in it. And that diversity of all the things that it does makes it hard to manage on a day-to-day basis. And this team that you have assembled here is top-notch in what it does. And I am very thankful every day that I get to go to work here because of that. And the board has been great with the support. Your comments very well taken. We hope in 2018, we had a lot of bridges to go through and hurdles to get over in 2017, and we're hoping to roll out a more robust communications plan in 2018. And we're going to need it, frankly, because of all the challenges in front of the town. And I look forward to working with the board again this upcoming year, and hoping that we're going to win more than we're going to lose. And I feel really good about that. So thank you.
Thank you, Dan. We've got a great team because we've had the ability to have great leaders, so you're just the next in that process. So we appreciate all your hard work. Go Pats, right?
Go Pats.
All right.
Mic drop, right?
Okay, so next is board and committee actions. Mark.
I'm sorry, say it again. Over here. I don't think we have anything.
Okay, perfect.
You're everybody's on the left.
Okay, upcoming agenda review. It's in front of us today. It does say January 30th, reserve BSU. I'm not sure about that.
For which one?
On the
Oh,
upcoming.
the ambulance fee, yeah, so they did not advertise, so it will not be here. It's going to reappear again on February 13th. There's an advertisement that they have to run about that.
So we're still going to hear the police and fire budget review and capital review on that date?
Yeah, so to let everybody know, essentially this schedule that's in front of you models will be almost identically to the day what was presented to you in front of last year. And the 13th
Yeah, that's how it's good.
is a big challenge, but some of those things will go faster, I think, than others.
Maybe we need to start earlier that night.
We certainly could do that. I have to notice the town that Dennis starts at 4:30, if anybody's up for that. So, yeah, they did, actually, the agenda notice for today was 4:30. It's up to you, let me know what you want to do.
I don't know what time anybody can meet, but that may be, I don't know if any of them are advertised already, but we can get some of the stuff out of the way. I don't know. We're gonna have to do something because
We have a lot of fun.
that's gonna be along the.
I'm fine.
Oh.
You didn't, you're looking at the
Oh,
13th, right?
yeah, that.
Yeah.
But we just moved this one. We just moved the end.
No, I saw that, yeah.
Oh, you're all right?
Yeah.
You ready?
Fine.
Okay. Take it now.
Yeah?
11.
Huh?
Okay. All right, so,
You want to do that?
I don't know what the, I'm not.
Start early, yeah, you want to start at 5?
You're talking about on the 13th?
On the 13th.
Anybody opposed to starting a little bit earlier on the 13th to get through all that, or what do you want to do?
Yeah. After 10 o'clock, I'll go.
Oh, well, not that early.
February 13th, yeah. Okay.
It's up to you in the front nine when the sun comes up so
She's,
late.
you know, yeah, she's interesting, you know, it's,
Mike, how do you feel about the 13th? Are you busy that day?
I don't even know where I'm supposed to be on the
All right,
13th.
let us know
Yeah.
if everybody is available. Mark,
Yep.
are you available?
4:30? Is
Sure.
that what you're thinking?
It's 5 o'clock.
5 would be better for me.
5 works fine. We just need 48-hour notice. So.
Okay, Mike, will you let him know, and if it's a go for Mike, we'll bump it up, if not, we'll leave it where it is. That's great. Anybody else have anything? He can't really add anything at this point, so it doesn't really matter. We got no time. Okay. So, individual items. Mark, we'll start with you.
I have nothing to add. It's all been said tonight. Go Pats.
Yes.
How's that?
Mike?
I'm gonna give my time to Norm because I ignored him on the licensing rules.
Yeah.
Norm?
I think you should take Eric first.
Oh, boy.
I'll give half to Eric and half to you.
All right, Eric, go ahead. I may forget to get back to you, though.
Nope, I don't have anything.
Nothing?
Nothing.
I have beef.
Uh-oh.
What's new?
Take that.
Chuck or Silver?
Well, then I'll go to the first one. And then I had, well, there was some information presented at the last meeting with regard to the golf department, or golf operations, and to whether their, all of their, whether they had fully funded the land acquisition costs and construction costs of their golf course. And it was presented at the last meeting that that had not been the case. And in fact, it is the case. And the reason that makes a significant difference, in my view, is because other kinds of sports activities that are not team activities, but individual activities, should be looked at in the same way that golf is. So pickleball, tennis, things of that nature that are not oriented toward field activities and team activities, those individual activities should be looked at as needing to fund the capital costs and the operating costs of the facilities that are built for them. I don't mind building them. We want to have tennis courts all over town, that's fine. And we want to have pickleball courts all over town, that's fine. But let's find a revenue source from the people that want those facilities built, just like we do for golf. But if we're going to say that pickleball and tennis are free, then we darn well better be able to turn to the golfers and say, go play golf. The second thing I'll say is that at the last meeting, Pat did a nice job of presenting a conceptual plan. That was part of an update of a master plan for the recreation department. And now I find we've got funding requests on this week's agenda for some of the items that were in that conceptual plan. There was no mention of that.
This was.
At the, okay, I guess I didn't hear it, because, you know, to me, it just means that any of the things that I was talking about in terms of understanding what the capital, I asked for two things. One was a projection of the timing of expenditures for those things that are in the conceptual plan, number one, so that we can see whether it fits within our 10-year plan. Number two, a projection of the maintenance costs and upkeep and so forth. Neither of which were contained in the proposals which you presented, and which are required by our charter. So I don't know why you know, it should come as a surprise that we would be asking that question. Many people in the past apparently have thought so carefully about it that they decided to include it in our charter. And I think for damn good reasons. And I just, it's almost a point of it being, I don't want to attach a label, but I just don't think that turning around from a conceptual plan and then throwing a funding plan for some of those expenditures is right at this point.
Can I make a comment? My memory was similar to yours. I didn't think that there was going to be any imminent funding request coming up. I thought that, in fact, Pat said, well, we're just talking about the drawings.
Right.
And
And that's what I was hearing. I could have blotted out other stuff, but that's what I was hearing.
the other thing is, you probably saw it too, we received an email from Joel Goldstein on the Finance Committee, and I don't know if he's accurate or not, but he claims that a third of the people in the room support pickleball were not Yarmouth residents. I don't know if that's true or it's not true, but if it's not true, I think that should have been disclosed.
I can say that I do know Pat said that she had some CPA articles coming up. I did hear that. It wasn't something that was trying to be hidden. She made it very clear that they were coming up. And whether the charter says that or not, and I'm not disputing it, I'm saying this is the first time we've heard it. So I just feel like we're being inconsistent with what we're requiring. Because it seems like every time Pat comes to us with a plan, we're requiring her to go through different hoops than we're requiring any other person who puts a plan in front of us. And I don't like that. We have made expenditures from this town. I've been sitting here for a lot of years. I've never seen anybody come to us with any plan for maintenance. I agree it's a good idea, but I haven't seen it. So if that's a policy we want to make going forward, I think that's important. I was happy to hear Dan say that she was preparing that. I think that's great. But I think we need to be consistent. And I haven't seen consistency, and I feel like there's a particular parcel of our community that's being picked on, or I should say of staff. And I don't think that's fair. And I also have to say that, you know, when you talk about golf and recreation, we don't charge people to play on the playground or to walk on the track. I mean, at some point in time, you know, there are things that are recreation pieces in our community that people support for recreation. And golf just has never been one of those things. And I'm not saying we shouldn't charge for pickleball, but I'm saying you can't say that you have to charge and have a financial plan for everything, because some things we just do for the greater good. We don't charge people to use the dog park. Should we? Maybe. We don't. I mean, but this is what I'm saying. I feel like we're taking out one piece of something and looking at it. Well, that's fine, but let's be consistent and make sure that we're doing it with everything.
I think what I'm saying is very consistent. I'm saying that individual sports compared to team sports or things that are of a broad recreational direction. Walking on a cart path or on a running track, you wouldn't build that for individuals. You know, if you want to go on a running track at the Y, you've got to go pay a Y membership. You know, if you want to go play tennis in a tennis club, you've got to go pay a tennis membership. So why is the town expected to satisfy those individual needs as opposed to team sports or things that you would never see on a paid basis? You wouldn't see a track on a pay basis. People don't build those and charge individual memberships. You know, it's just, I think it's a different concept. And secondly, you know, Tracy, I've talked on and on for 5 years about the maintenance of our public facilities. And ask, where's the money in the budget? And if we turn back expenses, I said, why are we turning back money when we've got maintenance needs that aren't being met? And that's with regard to any number of different facilities. It's not specific to recreation.
No, I get that, but it's always.
Parks.
It's been after the allocation's been made, and I agree it should come tandem, but I'm saying at this point in time, now we're saying, you know, we're gonna wanna move forward, and that's fine, but that should, if that's gonna be our policy, that should be our policy for every public process.
Well, it is our policy, it's in our town charter, that is our policy. If our charter is not our policy
No,
as
it
a
should be.
town, then what is?
I'm just saying, I've sat here a long time, we've seen a lot of projects come before us, I've never seen that made plan. Just
Well,
that's
I'm
fact.
sorry that the board has not followed our town charter, but I don't think that I should feel guilty about asking for it
No,
now.
I don't, I just wanted to make sure that we're consistent moving forward, if that's gonna be the policy that
Well,
we're
why
gonna
shouldn't
follow.
it be going forward if that's what it is in our charter? You want to change the charter, change it.
Anybody else have any comments or items?
No,
Or is that your only one? No?
Yes.
Okay.
I'd just like to add that I associate myself with your comments, Madam Chairman. I think that we as a board, we as a board have to wrestle with this question then, because I think we may be creating some confusion, you know, with the manager as well as the administrator and town staff, and as we develop a policy. So we should look at this policy and come to some conclusion on it, rather than criticize individual department heads for not following one member's perception of what's in the charter or not. So I think we as a board at some point should put this on the table and address it, because
Well, I think to your point, Mark, I do think it is in the charter, and I do think it is our responsibility to not, to make sure we clarify to them
Right.
what the expectations are, so they're not caught off guard. That's what I'm trying to convey from.
and I
from
support you
going
in that completely.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that has anything? Dan, anything?
I will mention that tomorrow night is another meeting of the Mattokees School Building Committee, 5 o'clock at the DY Library, and also Finance Committee tomorrow night. Topics include
Cape Tech
Cape Tech and DY's presentation, so if anybody wants an up-to-date, as we know, a presentation for the schools, then that would be tomorrow. That's tomorrow night at, Lumet,
Cape Tech and DY.
Cape Tech and DY, you're right, Lumet, we'll turn the air conditioner on.
Two times a week for the last
Oh my God.
3 or 4 weeks. Yeah. They're all boring.
What time is that gonna start at?
6:30.
Thank you. So, other than that, I'm complete.
Do we have a consent agenda, Sarah?
There was 2 items on the consent related to application for entertainment license from Parks and Recreation for movies at Peter Homer Park and movies at Smugglers Beach, entertainment license.
I'll move the consent agenda.
Any discussion? All's in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Do you have any updates, Mr. Administrator?
That was pretty much it, I just kind of took that a turn, sorry about that.
No, it's my fault.
Motion to adjourn?
For a second?
Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Too many items, too many big
Thank you,
items.
everybody. The next item on our agenda is the Recreation Commission Master Plan
Yeah,
update.
from the
For
call
that,
fire
we
department.
have Ms. Pat Armstrong
Well,
and
that's
with
true, too.
CDM's David Young and Able Landscape Architect Michael Dodson are joining me this evening from CDM Smith. CDM Smith was hired by the town of Yarmouth in 2008 to do a master plan of the 2 larger parks in town, Flax Pond and Sandy Pond. After the addition of the Cape Cod Rail Trail, the Community Preservation Group back in 2014 funded a secondary update to that plan, including the master plan for old townhouse known as Homer Park, so that we could see the impacts, both economic development and usage-wise, of that add-in of the rail trail that connects all 3 of those parks. Tonight, even though it was started in 2014, we had numerous public meetings with local groups of interest that utilize the parks.
children's programs, sport and non-sport, adult programs, local charter schools who don't have their own field facilities and utilize the town fields for their sports programs, including tennis, as well as quadrangle field programs. And we found this one group called Pickleball that came about. Everyone here who's here for pickleball, please raise your hands so the selectmen know you're here. Thank you very much for that. They've been waiting to talk to you. I told them that public comment was earlier. So they wanted you to see them and hear them in their visual voices. So what we did was look at the usage of the parks, putting in some new amenities such as pickleball courts, and to look through the executive summary of a new priority. The first master plan, which included the improvements to Flax Pond, was decided to be done in all 4 phases, 1 park at a time, and then move on to a second park. After the demand and the interest from local groups, we stopped our work at Flax Pond and the last phase, and we began and redirected our work to Sandy Pond, which is a part of this master plan. And we're looking at new funding approaches to make that happen. So that's my introduction, and I will leave it up to the very competent representatives from CDM Smith. These gentlemen have been very impactful in your community. They've designed bathhouses at your beaches. They've designed the Homer Park from start to finish and capping of the landfill.